Chapter 401 Back to Headquarters. On the Great Route, hundreds of big pirates with a bounty of more than 100 million Bailey were all destroyed in one day. The Navy captured nearly 1,000 people, killed Ulysses, the Earl of Blood, and carried historical texts. Guy returned. In just a few days, the news spread all over the sea. The whole world was horrified and deeply shocked by the outstanding achievements of the Navy. During this period of time, the Navy wrapped up the remaining power of the King's division, wiped out the pirate groups in Alabasta, and smashed one pirate group after another under the Navy's iron cavalry. Sengoku naturally won't miss such a good opportunity. It's strange that he doesn't get involved in beating up the Reservoir Dog. Therefore, this cleanup storm not only appeared in Alabasta, but also quickly spread out from Alabasta and quickly spread throughout the sea. For a time, in the Great Route where pirates were rampant in the past, there was almost no trace of pirates. That's why Sengoku would agree to Loya's plan. If he didn't want to, Loya obviously couldn't have enough confidence to continue the plan. Even if he goes his own way, Guy and Ulysses will teach him how to be a man. It was Sengoku who saw the results of his success and agreed to Loya's protection. And this is also the best way to clear the sea without breaking the balance. For a time, the Navy was unparalleled in the limelight. However, while the Navy has achieved a remarkable record in the past, there is another thing that is even more attractive. That is a giant dragon, a living giant dragon, appearing in front of the world. Marineford, southeast corner. All the buildings here have been demolished. The residents in a radius of several kilometers have been evacuated, and it has become a completely uninhabited land. On the periphery of this no man's land, 5 lieutenant generals of the headquarters personally led the troops stationed to prevent all personnel from approaching, and the 3 generals of the Navy took turns on duty to monitor the movement of this area at all times. Such a tight defense is of course to prevent others from disturbing Loya and disturbing this terrifying and explosive creature. Sengoku's arms and the seagull on his head did not dare to approach several kilometers away, and squatted on the ground and shivered, so Sengoku had to go to the hinterland alone and came to Loya. Gollum. Even though he had seen Loya's figure once in the photo, when he stood in front of the real dragon, he still swallowed involuntarily. It's so huge. Huh. Smelling the familiar smell, Roha, who was holding a sea king and was about to throw it into his mouth, froze and turned his head. Then, "Yo, Marshal, have you eaten yet?" As he spoke, he handed a sea king with a shark-like shape to its claws to Sengoku. The Byakugan that the shark turned over was bleak, his entire abdomen was hollowed out, and Sengoku's face turned pale. "No, I'm not hungry yet." Sengoku quietly took a step back, avoiding the smell of blood, then frowned and asked, "Why don't you let the chef cook it for you? Can you get used to eating raw food now?" "Actually, it really has to be." Loya blinked, then threw the Sea King, which was comparable to the size of a warship, and swallowed it with his mouth open. Boom, clack clack. Loya answered Sengoku's question while chewing on the bone. Dragons' recipes are much broader, more complex and different than those of humans. The delicacies of the past are as boring as swallowing sand in my mouth. On the contrary, these fresh sea kings are slightly more can get me a little bit interested. I can prove this. Ms. S walked out from the side, carrying the spatula with a bad expression. Really? I can't even conquer my old lady's cooking skills. Ms. S is a chef who joined the Navy around the same time as Sengoku and others. Now almost everyone in the Navy has been in the boot camp and eaten the meals she cooked. For that taste, no one will question anything. Thank you for your hard work, Ms. S. Sengoku sighed helplessly, and then ordered the soldiers to help Ms. S bring back the kitchen utensils. After waiting for Ms. S and the rest of the soldiers to walk away, Sengoku sat cross-legged on the ground and rubbed his temples. Then tell me, what are you going to do next? Loya has turned into a dragon, and he can't change back. Although everyone is very happy that the Navy has a combat power that is enough to deter the world, as a marshal, he has to think more. What about your plans, Jones? Minnie, wait and more. Those things can only be left alone. Loya tickled Kiba with his claws, but also a little helpless. But don't worry, they don't dare to cause any problems. Oh, by the way, what does the world government say? Can the Chihuahai be settled? Hearing this question, Sengoku hesitated for a while, and then said cautiously, you know, Jones had no foundation before this, and that group of subordinates were also blown up by the explosive rock. So the world government can control him now. There are doubts about his power, and he is worried that he can't afford the name of Chihuahai. So, for the time being. Is that so? Loya understood Sengoku's caution. Although it was a small thing compared to what happened later, it was indeed the trigger for everything. But now that the plan has changed, Sengoku is worried that Loya will be dissatisfied with it. After all, there seems to be no one who can stop Loya now. But it's obviously not in their interest to leave the two Chihuahai empty. Who else is their choice? The current time is not the era when the Straw Hat appeared in the future. Neither Sengoku nor the 5 old stars would like to see the balance be broken. Especially after Loya and the others have collected such a large group of pirates. Although the sea area is wide, they cannot withstand any stimulation. Forced by the situation, it is imperative to choose a new Shichibukai, which is why Loya asks this question. The list is with me, but it's uncertain, and we can't arrest them. Sengoku took out a document from his arms. This time, because of the CP0 matter, he went to the Holy Land Marijoa, and brought the list back, and he didn't have time to destroy it. Let me see who they are. Randy Fink of the Giant Wolf Pirates, Bronzebeard of the Barrel Pirates. Sengoku read out a series of names. Suddenly he paused, then continued, and Alien Jones from Cannibal Island, and Portgas D. Ace from the Spade Pirates. Alien. No, Ace. Cough cough. Loya almost choked on his saliva, coughed several times, and froze a large area of the sea in front of him. Ace. What does the world government want to do? Don't they know that this is Carp's grandson? It's precisely because I know, that's why this arrangement is made. Sengoku sighed, feeling his head bigger. In this regard, Luoya shook his head, the 2 dragon temples slapped the air, and said with emotion, killing the heart. In the previous life, I saw that Ace was invited as Shichibukai several times in the original work. Loya also simply thought that it was the expression method used by the old thief Oda to prove Ace's power from the side, so he didn't go into it. But after coming to this world, if you put yourself in the shoes and think about it, you will find how much tricky it is. Who is Carp? A bastard who gave up his position as a general with a single, I refuse. Although the later credit was fictitious, he was also the ruthless man who really pushed Roger into a corner several times. Knowing that Ace is his grandson, and Garp is very angry about it, are you still going to invite him as Shichibukai? What is this for? Do brothers fight tigers and go into battle as father and son soldiers? Not to mention that the world government is preparing to draw Ace to its own camp and fulfill Garp's wish in disguise. Had they been so kind, there would have been no coup like the one 200 years ago. It is more likely that the world government is very worried about the Navy and wants to blackmail Garp with Ace. After all, once Chihuahai is deprived of his position, they can justifiably send a large army, and even ask the Navy to destroy it. This wave of routines is playing very six drops. Chapter 402 Unknown World. But fortunately, Ace knew that Roger was his own father. Although he never recognized it, his heart was full of flesh. How could he really care nothing? As his father-killing enemy, the world government could not agree to become Chihuahai and make the world government happy. If he didn't agree, the world government would have one less thing to threaten Garp, and even said that the Navy's trump card would save a group of people from harm. I have to say, coincidences are sometimes really scary. The Antonio family began to act because of the trace of the Uranus, forcing the 5 old stars to be careful and vigilant. Neither side dared to ignore the powerful combat power of the Navy. As a result, the CPO was sent to Alabasta to issue a warning in the name of asking the Navy to turn over historical texts. The 5 old stars invited Ace to become Chihuahai, and wanted to use this as a threat. Neither side actually has any ill will towards the Navy, but they are both afraid that the Navy will fall to each other, so they do things that seem to have different styles but have the same purpose. Stop talking about this. I get a headache when I say it. Sengoku casually wanted to give the list to the goat beside him to eat, but he suddenly remembered that his pet was too frightened to move before he approached here, so he coughed awkwardly and put the list in his arms. Actually, Jones' qualification to be appointed as Chiwahai is quite high. After all, his strength is there. As long as he shows it well in the next time, the 5 old stars will naturally bring him up. The most perfect plan is not to control what your opponent is, but to let your opponent follow his heart and accomplish your purpose. Of course Loya understood this, and nodded in agreement to skip this topic. Anyway, after calculating the time, Jones should have discovered the backhand he left behind. The so-called power gap is not a problem in the eyes of the Frost Dragon. Let's talk about you, your body. I'll tell you when I get back. Before Sengoku could finish speaking, Loya interrupted him. Come back. Sengoku frowned. Loya, you can't run around like this. Ha ha ha, I know. After all, there are too many people staring at me. Loya said with a smile. But don't worry, I won't leave here, at least my body is here. I'm just going a world out of your reach. A world out of reach. Sengoku pondered the meaning of Loya's words and fell into deep thought. New world, Dressrosa. The atmosphere in the palace at the moment is still very depressed, and it has been like this since the day Carp landed. Everyone didn't dare to make a sound, and quietly looked at the tall man on the throne. Doflamingo's face was gloomy and terrifying. The domineering and AWE-inspiring aura of the past was all messed up, and it became violent and dangerous, like a beast that chose people and was about to devour everything. In this terrifying atmosphere, Toripal and the others were panting uneasy like a candle in the wind. A trace of invisible aura slowly drifted out, so that the huge palace could no longer hear a sound. But in Doflamingo's terrifying aura, there was a person sitting carelessly on a luxurious chair, eating donuts and buttoning his booger, as if he was not worried about the anger of the Dark Coon Lord in front of him. The mint-blowing aura was in front of him, like a wave hitting a reef, helplessly splitting into two and dispersing toward both sides. That's the naval hero, Iron Fist Carp. After an unknown amount of time, Doflamingo finally spoke up. Navy, is it really going to be so over the top? Hearing Flamingo's words, Toripal cast his eyes on Garp, who was sitting opposite his young master, and swallowed. Whether it is Doflamingo or Iron Fist Carp, once they are angry, the result is not something they can bear. He prayed devoutly like never before, praying that Carp would be submissive and not anger Dover, who was already on the verge of his limit. But he was clearly going to be disappointed. In the face of Flamingo's question, Carp indifferently wiped his booger on the cushion of a precious chair and nodded. Yes, that's just too much. Boom. As soon as Carp finished speaking, a more terrifying aura erupted from Doflamingo. Even if Toripal and the others were not weak, they were still directly in the face of this aura. Collapsed to the ground. The terrifying momentum was like a substance, and it broke through the door in an instant and rushed outside. Even the clouds in the sky were twisted in the endless evil spirit. Garp's cloak of justice trembled in this wave of air. He held the senbei and exclaimed, "Oh, what a big monster wind." Speaking of which, Carp looked at Doflamingo and asked in mock surprise, "Don Quixote's kid, why are you looking so ugly? Don't you agree with our request?" "I agree to a fart." Doflamingo wanted to yell at Carp like that, but he didn't dare. Sengoku's actions this time made his heart cold. He knew very well that agreeing to the conditions of the Navy was the only chance for him to survive. The Navy is real, and Garp's attitude speaks for itself. Moreover, the Tianlong people who had contacted before and said that they would send people to put pressure on them did not move, as if they had forgotten themselves. Even Gai Duo, who traded artificial fruits with him, lost the previous battle and his whereabouts are unknown. At this moment, Doflamingo could not find any backers to resolve this crisis. Looking at Doflamingo, who was as pale as ink in front of him, Garp's heart was as sweet as honey. In the past, facing these Chihuahai, as a navy, he was always tied, and he couldn't even say a few harsh words. But now you can threaten the flamingos with your nose and face, and you don't have to worry about going back and being scolded. This feeling. So nice. But the other party didn't reply for a long time, and Carp's patience was almost exhausted. It seems that you are not ready to agree to our request, Wang Shachiwahai, Doflamingo. Garp stood up from his chair, obviously not as tall as a flamingo, but gave him the illusion that he is condescending. You have to think about it. This time you blew up Zephyr. There's a guy, but he's very, very angry. Click. Blue veins appeared on Doflamingo's forehead, and the eyes behind the sunglasses looked a little flustered. The news of Luo Yahualong has been spread all over the world with the news bird. How could he not know it? Even in Dressrosa, there was a group of idiots who established the dragon god cult and regarded Loa as a god. If it was put in the past, he would directly send someone to clear up this kind of guy. But he dare not. He was afraid that the dragon really had some special ability and would come to avenge his followers. The dignified generation of heroes, Don Quixote Doflamingo, has turned into this trembling appearance, which is enough to show his fear of Loya. Not to mention that in order to get Jones, the explosive rock he provided also injured Zephyr. If he doesn't agree, Garp will definitely not shoot at him, but what follows is the terrifying monster. It looks like you still don't agree, so there's nothing you can do. Garp shrugged, spread his hands, turned and walked out the door. I've been out for so long, and it's time for me to go back to the headquarters to have a look. Otherwise, Sengoku will scold me for being lazy again. Hey, the life of the lieutenant general is really hard. As Garp said, he put his hand on the armrest of the palace gate, and the next moment he would push the door out. At this moment, Doflamingo bit Kiba and said those words with difficulty. I agree. Chapter 403 The Secret History from the Dragon Family. What conditions did Doflamingo agree to? I am afraid that only the two practitioners, Sengoku and Garp, know about this issue. Even Crane, the general staff of the entire army, is completely ignorant of this matter. However, for the residents of Dressrosa and the lineage of the former King Riku, Garp's arrival and departure are no different. The days are still the same as before, the people live and work in peace and contentment, the hustle and bustle are prosperous, the road to revenge is far away, and there is no hope. The laughter of flamingos can still be heard in the palace, and he is still the Joker of the dark world. A month later, Marine Headquarters, Marineford. Yawning, the green pheasant lazily walked out of the door and walked towards the area where Loya slept. Today is the day he and Kizaru change shifts. The three generals will each be stationed for a month. This is a rule set by Sengoku. The meaning of sending a general to be there is not to worry about what dangers Loya will encounter. After all, the terrifying record of killing Ulysses is there, and no one dares to offend that terrifying monster easily. The main purpose of their stationing was actually just to avoid someone sneaking in and being accidentally killed by Loya. After all, during this time, the sea was not at all peaceful. Walking out of the small courtyard, Aokiji buttoned his face and strolled sleepily on the clean stone road. Soldiers patrolling along the way saluted him to show their respect. Just after walking around the corner, Aokiji suddenly stopped and turned to look behind him. Huh, Mr. Garp, when did you come back? That sturdy old man with short Madara white hair who kept eating with a bag of senbei was not Tekken Garp. Hearing the movement from behind, Kappo chomped on the senbei, turned around and greeted Aokiji. Yo, Aokiji. Long time no see, I just came back. I heard that you have made great achievements in this battle, but it gave the Navy a good face. Well, most of it is Loya's credit, I'm just playing around. Qingzi replied lazily, then looked at the Justice fortress with two huge Chinese characters in front of it, and asked strangely, is the marshal going to have a meeting again? Why didn't you notify me? This road only leads to the headquarters fortress, which is where Garp was heading just now. Oh yes, This road can also detour to the headquarters prison where Loya had been imprisoned for half a year. Just thinking about Garp's character, Aokiji didn't think he would do anything there. As for Aokiji's question, Garp laughed. It's nothing. Didn't you catch so many big pirates before? Except for those who need to be executed in public, the rest still need to be escorted to the advanced city. Before it's been dragging on, and now that I'm back, Sengoku asked me to go for a run. Oh, so it is. Chingzi had no doubts about him. After all, the prisoners who were arrested were all vicious thugs, and the lieutenant generals of the headquarters would escort him. Although Garp was a lieutenant general, no one would be foolish enough to regard him as a lieutenant general. With him in action, it is indeed guaranteed that nothing will go wrong. Then I'll go over first. I'll talk when I have time. After speaking, Garp waved his hand and turned his head to move on. Watching him walk away, Chingzi stretched his waist. It's very troublesome. Fortunately I'm a general. As expected, it should be the same as Loya said, forget the collective execution. The escorting of the prisoners is done by the lieutenant generals. If you look at the original book, you will know that even if Ace is the son of the pirate king, it is the lieutenant generals who escorted him from the advanced city to the naval headquarters. That's why Loya worked so hard to get the position of lieutenant general, making it impossible for the Tianlong people to start, because they are really the Jinchuriki column of the navy, and no one can easily touch them. After saying a dangerous remark, Aokiji turned away and walked in the direction of Loya. Navy headquarters, Marshal's office. Garp didn't tell the truth to Aokiji. When he came back this time, in addition to escorting the pirates, the more important thing was to report the situation to Sengoku. There are only 3 people in the office at the moment, Sengoku, Garp and Zephyr. The 3 sat very close together, secretly talking about something. On the table in front of them, pictures were laid out there. From the label on the back of the photo, we can know that this is the image that Loya once left during the elite assessment. You are not mistaken. How could Loya? Zephyr folded his hands and used his prosthetic limb to pick up the photo on the table, frowning tightly. Maybe this is Doflamingo's trick, and what he gave you is actually made-up information. No, probably not. Garp shook his head and denied Zephyr's opinion. I watched him take out this document from the secret room with my own eyes, and before that, I didn't reveal anything about it. Even if he wants to forge it, he has to have it. Only at that time. And, he magnified the blood on half of his body to activate the detection agency. He kept it so tightly, it would be too funny if it was fake, right? Hearing Garp's words, Zephyr couldn't help falling into silence. Indeed, this matter was only after Loya was transformed into a dragon and showed unrivaled power. Sengoku remembered what they had seen before, and temporarily ordered Garp to do it. If Flamingo can still prepare in advance like this, how could he be so mixed up? With this ability to see through the future, let alone Chiwahai, the 4 emperors have his place. How could they be threatened by the navy? Sengoku rubbed his temples, picked up the information about the Tianlong family's secret treasure, and carefully reread it word by word. But no matter how he checked it, the same answer was revealed in the full of praises. But the question is, if Loya is really that thing, why has he never shown the same power again after that? That's time-space freeze. With his character, if you don't use this kind of powerful power, then you might as well hope that he won't cause trouble. Moreover, judging from the picture, that thing is obviously not similar to Loya at all. One is a skeleton frame exuding a dim light, with broken wings and a faint blue ghost fire, which is completely different from Loya's full physique and hideous jaw. The abilities are the same, but the shape is surprisingly huge, and Sengoku has to wonder if Doflamingo is really lying to them. And that Jones, not a simple figure either. Thinking of this, Sengoku sighed sadly. Loya, do you like to cause trouble, or does trouble always like to get close to you? Perhaps only God knows this question. After a pause, Sengoku looked up at the 2 who were frowning in thought, and suddenly scolded with a smile, why are they all shy? Even with the IQ of the old man, do you think you can figure it out? That's okay. This is the end of the matter, and everything will be discussed when Loya wakes up. Carp. Cut. Zephyr. It's okay, but the last time Loya was asleep, there was such a big movement. This time, tisk tisk. Hearing Zephyr's words, Sengoku remembered what Roha made when he and Vegapunk talked to him last time, and the corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Shut up, Zephyr. After many days of training and thinking about opening, Zephyr's face was a little more moist than Yuhi in the past, but seeing Sengoku's frantic appearance at this moment, his complexion became even better. Chapter 404 Between Dreams. In the haze, Loya felt that he was walking in an endless fog. He couldn't remember how long he had been gone, or how he got here, and he couldn't even remember what was painted on the photo he just passed by. Without thoughts and tirelessness, Loya walked quietly on an unknown road, heading for an unknown destination. I don't know how long, a minute, or a century. Suddenly he came back to his senses and found that he had come to a place that was a little familiar. Where is this? Where? This is a place similar to the universe, with countless stars dotted around him, disappearing and appearing from time to time. He stepped on the void, like a behemoth that traverses the planet, suffocating. The huge star shining with dazzling orange light in the distance is constantly erupting with hot fluctuations. It's dangerous there. Loya made a judgment in an instant. But what surprised him the most was not the near-exaggerated, yet lethal sun. Around his body, pieces of mirror-like fragments floated here. The scene above made Loya narrow his eyes. Big head dead pervert. On the broken mirrors, what emerged was the scene he saw last time when he was dragged into the dream. Familiar streets, familiar exhaust, familiar rooms, familiar people. Here, is it the space that was broken last time? Loya pondered so. At this moment, a long-lost and familiar voice appeared in his mind. Yes, no. Edith. Loya suddenly widened his eyes and looked around, trying to find the mysterious system creator. But he was disappointed. No matter how he searched, he was still the only one here. The planet is turning, but he seems to be still, which is out of place here. Don't look for it, Edith replied. I exist, and I don't exist either. The connection between you and me is not as close as you think. Only in your dreams can I reluctantly expose. Is that so? Thinking of the white light he saw when the illusion was shattered, Loya nodded in understanding. Then he asked, so, can you give me an explanation now? Why does he travel? Why does he magic? Where is this place? And what is Edith and the owner of that eye? He had too many questions to ask, but he didn't know how to ask. It can only be generalized, with an explanation, to summarize the problem. That question. Let's ask the one behind you. Behind. Loya turned around blankly, glanced at it, and suddenly held his breath. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief and looked again, but the thing still existed, ancient and eternal. Welcome to Dreamland, traveler. He said so. It was a golden dragon that was so huge that it was unreasonable. Roha originally thought that the shape of his shape after his transformation was already considered a behemoth even among the giant dragons described by Xuanwan. But compared with the one in front of him, he found that his insignificance was a bit exaggerated. The golden vertical pupil of light is even bigger than the sun not far away from him. Each kiba tooth is long enough to penetrate a star. Along with his breathing, an unknown wave spread out, and the entire universe suddenly lit up, and then dimmed again as the breathing ended. And so on and on, so on and on. It's as if this world was born from him. Please forgive him that he can only describe the other party's head, because standing in front of the other party, even if he tries his best to watch, he can only see the other party's head. This is just a small area of the opposite side facing him. Dream. Between. Loya chewed on this unfamiliar term. I think of Druid's emerald dream. Loya's quick indifference after being surprised made the golden dragon a little curious. He asked with a smile, you don't seem to be afraid at all. Why? There is nothing to fear in life or death. Although I really want to say that. Loya shrugged and spread out his hands. But the truth is, if you were malicious to me, I think, I can't come or you hear. Even. Loya looked up at the golden dragon in front of him. I would never have known the existence of Edith. The golden dragon was dumbfounded at first, and then laughed out loud. A burst of invisible fluctuations spread out, and the entire universe began to tremble uncontrollably. The planets became yuhi, and the volcanoes on them erupted. Just when Loya was worried that those planets would be laughed to death by the other party, he stopped laughing and looked at Loya with interest. It's really interesting, little guy, you are smarter than I thought. No wonder, after all, you are also the lucky one who broke the boundary between fantasy and reality, and it is normal to have some skills. Quote. The lucky ones who break the line between fantasy and reality. This is a lot of information. Just as Loya was about to ask about the boundary between fantasy and reality, a scream came to them quickly from far to near. Loya looked intently, the corners of his mouth twitching. It was a fat man with eyes as thick as the bottom of a wine bottle. He was a fat man before, especially with a face of baby fat. But compared to the one in front of him, he could be called a bamboo pole. The fat man screamed all the way, and in an instant, he flew in front of the giant dragon, and he was so frightened. Another unlucky bastard who was rejected by the illusion. Go back. The dragon shook his head and said. With his words, the fat man's eyes instantly became confused. Even in the face of the behemoth in front of him, his expression was still very calm, as if he had changed a person. Or, he was just demented. Then, Fatty suddenly rushed up, and a round purple space gap opened in the void, engulfing him. Looking at the familiar modern scene across the gap, it should be Fatty's kennel. Well, now Loya knows what is the result of the unfortunate person who did not break the boundary between fantasy and reality. After doing this, the golden dragon raised his eyelids and said to Loya, as you can see, this is a place where reality and illusion are linked, and countless fantasy worlds are intertwined here. Some people can break into this place in their dreams. Or be the lucky one and enter the fantasy world. Or be thrown out directly, Nanki Yaimung. Quote. You are very lucky, Loya. The golden dragon said. You are lucky to break the boundary between fantasy and reality and enter the world of One Piece. And, you have achieved achievements that I have not seen for a long time. Quote. Really, it's incredible. So, what the hell am I doing? Loya looked at the excited golden dragon with a bewildered look on his face, feeling as if he had accomplished something remarkable inadvertently. Chapter 405 Source of Power. It's up to me to say this. Along with the cold air, Edith's voice echoed in Loya's mind again. Do you remember that time we were trapped in your memory? Of course I remember. Loya turned to look at the mirror fragments beside him, and reached out to fiddle with it, causing it to keep flipping in midair. Meet again, Big Head Pervert. In that fragment, Big Dead Pervert is holding his lovely daughter and jumping into the swimming pool below. This episode kept repeating. Watching Pervert keep jumping off the high platform, Loya felt a little ghost inexplicably. Including everything you've seen, it's all things in fantasy that exist and don't exist. As Edith spoke, the fragments in Loya's hands slowly condensed. Fantasy, rhetoric, longing, whatever their starting point, they are all good to the individual who created them. The pieces rolled over and over, and suddenly melted like water droplets, blending together into a new mirror. Standing in front of the mirror, Loya found that the person printed on it was not him, but the faces of happiness or cunning, satisfaction or cruelty. But since there are illusions that can make people feel happy, there are naturally also illusions that make people sad and collapse. The next moment, the picture in the mirror began to change, and scenes like natural disasters flashed before Loya's eyes. Weeping pregnant women, desperate crowds, festering Mukuro corpses, yellow sand everywhere. Lava, floods, ruins, all the desperate situations that can be imagined, are all presented in the mirror. Dreams do not belong to any illusion, whether those illusions are good or bad. Edith said, but it complements each illusion, sharing their joy and bearing their sorrow. Their quality is reflected in the dream. Quote, "Countless illusions are created every minute and every second, and then disappear. But it doesn't really affect the dreams. It's like I'd like to cry with you, but I don't want to die with you. But for the rest of the fantasy world, this is undoubtedly fatal." Following Edith's words, the picture in the mirror turned again, and a scene similar to the universe appeared. The reason why it is similar is because there are vague gates around this universe. In the real universe, this would be counterintuitive. Some gates appeared suddenly, and next to them, some gates collapsed quickly. The appearance and disappearance of each scattered gate will inevitably cause a chain vibration of the surrounding gates. Some of the results were good, and those gates got even more dazzling. But some of the results are bad. The door directly collapses, and it turns into black smoke and dissipates in the universe. It was like this over and over again and again and again. So in order to avoid being affected, at this time, a nightmare was born. A nightmare born from the illusion itself. Nightmare. Loya turned his head to look around, and suddenly said, "Emerald Nightmare. Are you from Azeroth?" "Not that kind of thing." Edith was silent for 2 seconds. That's also a terrifying existence in a fantasy world, but compared to the nightmares between dreams, they are undoubtedly much more peaceful. "You just said, created." Loya felt that he had grasped the key point. "Including these illusions, including this place, are they all created by human fantasy? Can you hear me finish?" Edith's voice sounded a little sullen. Thinking about what the other party had done before, Loya nodded and said that he would not talk too much. After being silent for 2 seconds, Edith continued to explain. "The birth of this nightmare is not why it corrupts anything. They have no consciousness, no emotions, and only follow a certain law to clear out the existences that do not belong to the illusion. Then reorganize the illusion and put everything back on track, back to the way the illusion existed in the first place." Quote, "Preserve yourself in the shock of the adjacent illusion. Like the time we were trapped before. It was the nightmare that pulled you into the memory prison, thereby excluding you from the world of One Piece. Your existence has completely changed the world of One Piece. This is something that Nightmare will never allow." "So it is." Luoya suddenly realized that it was no wonder that he had always felt that kind of out of place watching TV before. It turned out that there was such a situation in it. After all, according to Edith, for the One Piece world, he is the lethal fluctuation. If it is an ordinary lucky person, maybe that time will be completely lost in the memory, and then the reincarnation will end and time will restart. "You are a genius, Loya. You have a powerful talent that you don't know," Edith said with admiration. "You completely ignored the interference of the nightmare on you. You clearly observed the singularity of the prison and found the way back." Quote, "You don't know what a great feat you have accomplished. In the countless eternal years between us monitoring dreams, you are the only few who can soberly resist the existence of nightmares. That said, I'm pretty good. Listen to the unit of counting, eternal. There are only a few left. I'm so stupid, why don't I know? But then again, I probably understand where this is, but..." Loya put down his hand and calmly looked at the golden dragon in front of him. "About my transmigration, about my power, where did these come from? I'm just an ordinary person, even if I have the kind of talent you mentioned, but for the inheritance of my dragon slayer and the body of the frost dragon, these can't be explained by a talent." Regarding the question of Loya, Edith smiled and said lightly, "Have you forgotten? Where is this place? Between the dream, a place that links reality and fantasy, where countless fantasy worlds are intertwined." Loya repeated what the other party had said before, and suddenly a flash of light flashed. "Wait, what do you mean? My power is actually what I imagined." "You are very savvy, but not quite there." Edith smiled with satisfaction, and then, 3 marks appeared in front of Loya, floating in the void. The first is a black pirate flag with a not-so-scare skull on it, and a straw hat on the skull. The second one is a light blue icon, like a bird flying with wings, and like a dancing fairy. The third, Yuhi color, represents blood, surrounded by a circle of unconnected lines with 6 raised thorns. The three symbols that Loya is familiar with can no longer be familiar. They are the world of One Piece, the pirate flag of the Straw Hat Pirates, the world of Fairy Tail, the emblem of the Fairy Tail Guild, the world of Warcraft, and the flag of the tribe. You complained that there is no ice dragon slayer in the fairy tale world. This resentment came true with your thoughts, so you have the identity of the dragon slayer. This comes from your childhood. Your love for Azeroth makes you intoxicated. Arthas's life is your most precious memory. Therefore, the frost dragon becomes your body. This comes from your youth. You yearn for the unfettered world of One Piece, longing for adventure and freedom, so you came to the world of One Piece. This comes from those stressful days after you go to work. Combining these 3 points, you have come to the world of One Piece, and you have become the Ice Dragon Slayer who controls the power of the Frost Dragon. This is the source of your power. Edith said. However, just your existence is enough to make the nightmare repel you, not to mention the power that does not belong there in the world of One Piece. So when I discovered you, the lucky one, I followed you all the time to help you resist the rejection of the nightmare. As a result, you are more perfect than I thought. Not only did I ignore the rejection of the nightmare without me taking action, but I also broke the shackles of the nightmare with my own efforts. To be honest, I have never seen a character like you. If I hadn't been observing you, I would have almost made you the Aborigines of the One Piece world. Quote. Edith said happily. Chapter 406 Money is hard to buy, I'm happy. Recognizing Fairy Tail was in his childhood. Every day after school, Loya would sneak into the bookstore and never go home until he finished reading the new issue. It was also that evening that he met his first love, and at the corner of the bookshelf, he held the same comic book in both hands. It was really, what a wonderful memory. And World of Warcraft. When I was in college, just in time for the opening of the ICC. In his life, the most reckless Mukuro and arrogant years were in World of Warcraft, where he experienced the life of Prince Arthas Menethil with the Guild Gay. In the propaganda CG, the scene of Arthas, who transformed into the Lich King, penetrated the ice with a sword and summoned the Frost Dragon. Until now, it is still clearly kept in his mind. But these are over, until work begins. These are just some memories after all. Going to work, going home, going to work, going home. A single tone became the main theme of his life, and the boredom and pressure made him start to like watching pirates. Looking at the unrestrained and free Luffy inside, he remembered his youth that was gone forever. But he didn't expect that his fantasies would actually become his own strength. The nightmares born in the illusion have an indescribable deterrent power. Things that don't belong to that world will soon be eliminated. Even if you are lucky enough to escape and become the lucky one who breaks the boundary between fantasy and reality, it will be difficult to do it again. To break away, to be bound in that world forever by a nightmare. Quote. And you, appear here again and again. So, do you understand that you are special? Seems to understand a bit. Loya scratched his chin and suddenly asked, that's not right. Since I'm so powerful, why did I cross over? It's impossible for the real world to exclude me. No, the real world won't reject anything. It was the golden dragon who spoke, and he gently opened and closed the huge dragon's mouth to answer Loya's doubts. Your transmigration is the same as the fat man you saw just now. All because of a dream. Quote. Dream. The corners of Loya's mouth twitched. That is to say, is it time to travel in a dream? But then again, why don't I make up my sleep during the May 1st holiday? Sleeping late and sleeping in time travel, this is too ridiculous. However, that's the truth. The golden dragon ruthlessly revealed the fact that, you will die if you sleep late. When you came here unconsciously, I thought you would be with those guys who came and went. It's the same, you will be repelled back after a walk. But I didn't expect that you not only took their things from World of Warcraft and Fairy Tale World by your fantasy ability, but you can also dive into the world of One Piece after that, and even bring a bowl of real-world instant noodles. Quote. I have to say, you are really a genius. You can still live so messed up as you are. I really will obey you without the help of the sun. Ordinary people are supporting the wall, but the giant dragon in front of them is supporting the sun. Okay, I'm done. Loya sat down with his hands crossed and knees depressed, the fact that it was too painful. Before, I was so careful and vigilant, thinking that the system was the same as those written in the book, and it was behind the scenes. As a result, I never thought that this was all my own fault. It's not that Loya has not considered the possibility of them deceiving him, but in his perception, the golden dragon Kamui in front of him is suffocating, and he is not at the same level as him. Will such a powerful existence deceive itself? It doesn't make sense. Loya is very self-aware, and he doesn't think the other party can get any benefits from his small self. Just like the 4 emperors of the New World, will they deceive a little kid who just went to sea to gain benefits? You can't even say a few more words, right? Watching Loya fell into contemplation, Edith and the golden dragon didn't seem to be in a hurry, waiting for him to slowly digest the message. I don't know how long it took before Loya got out of his thoughts, looked up at the golden dragon, and asked the questions that they had expected and that every lucky person would ask. Then, can I go back? Going back here, of course, does not mean returning to the world of One Piece. Loya felt it himself, although he didn't know how he came, but if he wanted to leave, he only needed a little sleep. What he said to go back was to go back to the world where he was born and raised, to his former family and friends, and to the familiar daily life. That question, you need to ask yourself. The golden dragon raised its front paw, tapped its big head with a paw, and brought Loya deep into his memory in a low voice. Do you want to go back? Are you willing to go back? You know, once you completely escape, in the world of One Piece, the nightmare will reorganize the illusion, and all traces of you will be erased. No one will remember you, and no one will know your existence. Going back, it means that he has abandoned everything in the world of One Piece, and it means that he is forever separated from Aokiji, Zephyr, his companions in the elite camp, and the justice he has implemented. That's the world he grew up in, yes, but the One Piece world also has a bond that he can't let go of. Looking at Loya, who was silent in front of him, the golden dragon had no expression of disappointment and expectation. He knew that this was a normal thing. This is the case for every lucky person who can appear in front of them. On the one hand, they recall the past and hope to find a way back home. But at the same time, it was difficult for them to let go of everything that came after, and let go of the people and things in the illusion. In this contradiction, some people choose the reality, and some people choose to abandon the past. But no matter how they choose or what the outcome is, they will linger in pain and grief for a long, long time. Seemingly unbearable, Edith said, actually, you still have a third way to choose. What? Loya raised his head full of anticipation and asked himself, no matter where it was an existence he couldn't let go. If he didn't know the truth of time travel and didn't have a single thought, maybe he wouldn't be so painful. But now that the road was in front of him, he was suddenly at a loss. You can still be the guardian of dreams. Edith gave a shocking answer, and even the golden dragon gave her a slightly surprised look. It's just that Loya, who was silent in his thoughts, didn't notice his movements and asked hesitantly. The guardian between dreams, is it the same as you? This seems to be a good path. Edith said that she had been by her side before, which meant that they could enter the fantasy world anytime and anywhere, and would not be rejected by the nightmare. And seeing how the golden dragon opened up the space and sent Fatty back also proved that they could return to reality. Yes, just like us. Edith replied, it's just that it's very difficult. We are all born from fantasy and do not exist in every world, so we can be guardians. But you are reality. Individuals, if you want to be a guardian, you can only say that there is a chance. Having a chance is enough. Loya interrupted Edith's words and looked back at the planets scattered in the universe with a smile. I hate life and death the most. Say I'm naive or naive, I just hate those things. Since I don't like it, then no matter how hard the road is, I will completely smash what I hate. Because I'm happy. So, tell me, what should I do? Edith stared blankly at Loya in front of him, amused by his speech. And admired. What a quirky guy, so okay. Let me tell you what to do next. Chapter 407. 1 year later. After Edith's narration, Loya understood how much he had to pay to become a guardian. And the most painful thing is that these prices are not what he is willing to pay, and can pay if he wants to pay. Because of the shackles of the illusionary nightmare, even if he wanted to return the things to the illusionary realm, it would be as difficult as reaching the sky. But at least, he already has a certain strength, which has laid a good foundation for him to become a guardian. The rest is up to him to handle it. After sending Loya away, Edith sat quietly in the void without saying a word. Seeing this scene, the golden dragon sighed faintly. You still haven't told him about you, Ivy. Facing the dragon's inquiry, Edith. No. Ivy raised her head and looked at the place where Loya disappeared, and a pretty face with a smile suddenly flashed across the void. I thought I had forgotten that name. But no need, Ivy said. He will know all this one day, but it's too early. Too early. Telling him will only lead to futile distress. This is the legendary mother's love. In response to this answer, the golden dragon suddenly said this on a whim. Then, this golden dragon, entrenched in the void, with a length of tens of thousands of kilometers, was able to eat a planet as a coffee bean. In an instant, it was frozen at a speed visible to the naked eye. Next time I dare to talk nonsense, this king will definitely not forgive me lightly. After all, Ivy snorted and disappeared. Looking at the direction of the disappearance, it is the One Piece world where Loya left. Consciousness has returned to the body, and Loya can even hear the sound of the waves lapping in his ears, and smell the fragrance of the soil from the tip of his nose. However, he still can't wake up. Once the body has been transformed into a dragon, it cannot be transformed back into a human again. Now that he has returned to the world of One Piece from the dream, the moment when he exists and does not exist in this world is his only chance to revise this cognition. Blocking the perception of the body, Loya put his consciousness in his body, so that the body of this giant dragon was clearly reflected in his mind. What a beautiful creature! Even if this is himself, Loya can't help but express such emotion. That huge yet vigorous body, covered with pale blue scales, exudes a hazy light under the sunlight. The mist brought by the icy cold drifted in the air and slowly coiled around the body, making the dragon appear more mysterious and beautiful. And not only the beauty, the dragon, but also his arrogance as a top predator. Beneath this beauty, the sharp dragon claws can slash the hard steel with a single stroke. Big, sharp kiba teeth and strong jaws are capable of shredding the shell of any prey. The ferocious horns, strong limbs, and sharp tail hammer all link this beautiful creature with death. But this is not what he wants. Between the mental vibrations, an illusory figure stood in front of the sleeping giant dragon. From the windlass and automatic justice cloak behind it, it can be seen that this figure is Loya. Quietly looking at the terrifying beast in front of him, Loya raised his hand and pressed it on the dragon's jaw. His height can only be touched in this position. Feeling the familiar wave in the palm of my hand, it is cold and dead, but full of vitality. Loya smiled slightly and said lightly, come back. Following Loya's words, a shimmer of light appeared in his palm. This light is very faint, but it exudes a coercion that makes people feel throbbing. Shimmer slowly climbed up the giant dragon, and soon, it covered his body. At this moment, an inaudible shattering sound appeared all around, as if a mirror had been broken, and gaps suddenly appeared all around. But those gaps are not pitch black. On the contrary, a dazzling light is gushing out from inside. Then, boom, crack. The mirror is broken. On the defensive line far away from Loya, Aokiji walked to the central building with Heish. Around the building, a Navy elite who has experienced the baptism of war is holding a gun and carefully patrolling every piece of land. Kazuna, I'm here to change shifts. Aokiji's voice was heard in the distance. Kyabu pushed open the window and stuck his head out of the window with a newspaper, Alas, Aokiji, why did you come so early today? In the past year, which time has the blue pheasant changed the shift and didn't come over at the last second? Unexpectedly, not only did it not exist today, but it was even half an hour earlier, and Huang Yuan was suddenly surprised. Call out. Seeing Kayaburu's open window, Aokiji flashed directly into the office from the window with a moon step. Then he skillfully took out the paper cup and poured himself a warm cup of hot coffee. Marshal Sengoku was called away by the 5 old stars again. I guess there will be some trouble coming back. I don't care if I don't see it. I think it's better to come and change shifts earlier. While drinking coffee, Aokiji looked out the window. In the distance as far as the eye can see, a touch of light blue is clearly visible. How is Loya? Still not awake? Well, it's still the same. Kazuna pushed the sunglasses on his glasses, and squinted his eyes like a retired cadre holding a newspaper. It used to be said that people are snooze, that is, they sleep like dead pigs, but now this sentence can be completely changed to become sleeping like a dragon. A year. He slept for a year without eating or drinking. Huang Yuan said in a sigh, it's no wonder that the legendary dragon has a long lifespan. With his sleeping method, it's strange that he doesn't live long. It's been a year. Aokiji held the coffee and sighed silently. From the day I saw it when I changed shifts, Loya maintained that posture and slept quietly for a year. No matter what happened in the outside world, he was so quietly entrenched there, not speaking, not eating or drinking, as if everything had nothing to do with him. But the fact is clearly impossible. The friction between the 5 old stars and the Antonio family is getting stronger and stronger. Although ordinary people do not feel it, they are still busy with 3 meals a day, wives and children, but they all know that war may be inevitable. And this time, I am afraid it will be a terrifying, global war. And being at the center of the war, it can even be said to be the reason, is the dragon in their navy. No matter who they are, they want to get this powerful force. To know the name of Earl of Blood, it is even more terrifying than outsiders imagine. Cyborg Kong, who had personally experienced that time, had explained to them that Earl of Blood was the only one who gave him an existence that could not resist thoughts. Loya, who can easily kill the Earl of Blood, is definitely the key to determining the trend of this war. Therefore, Sengoku was called over by the world government over and over again, and the reason need not be mentioned, no doubt that he was asked to stand in line. Judging from the fact that Sengoku became a marshal, if it was an ordinary event, he would definitely continue to be loyal to the world government and to the 5 old stars. Just like the death of Ace and the O'Hara incident in the original book, it was not enough to shake his loyalty. But now it is different. Loya is absolutely loyal to the Navy, there is no doubt about this, so his team will completely break the balance. The war has not yet broken out, because the 2 sides are afraid of each other and dare not touch the Navy, maintaining a delicate balance. And once Sengoku stands in line, the war will break out in an instant, and there is no room for it. Thinking of these troublesome questions, Aokiji continued to sigh. How long are you going to sleep, Loya? It's time to wake up. As soon as the voice fell, a terrifying coercion suddenly swept out, wrapping the entire Malinfodo, as if the substantial wind pressure spread out, uprooting the surrounding thick trees. Those well-trained soldiers were instantly stunned by this terrifying pressure, and only some powerful individuals could barely stay awake. The huge Malinfodo fell silent at a speed visible to the naked eye. Kizaru's hand holding the newspaper shook slightly, and when he heard the sound of the soldiers falling to the ground, he looked at the green pheasant strangely. Thank you for your hard work, Aokiji. Aokiji's face turned black, and it took a long time to squeeze a word out of Kiba's slit. Go away. Chapter 408 Alien Cold War. Holy Land, Mary Joa, Office of the 5 Old Stars. Yuan, Marshal, Big Event. The panicked voice came from the golden phone bug on the table. Just from the sound, you could tell how embarrassed the soldier opposite the phone bug was. On the sofa not far from Sengoku, the bald-headed old man holding his hands frowned and said, "Dignified naval soldier, what a sense of panic." Sengoku declined to comment on this evaluation. Anyway, it's just a means of pressure. He calmly picked up the phone bug and asked in a serious and solemn voice, "Tell me slowly, what happened?" During the time he left the naval headquarters, the Navy could never be without a leader. After all, there are some things that he still needs to make his own decisions. Hence, this particular phone bug came into being. Every time it sounds, it means that something happened in the headquarters that the generals can't handle. It seemed that Sengoku's calm tone played a role. The soldier sighed with relief, and finally calmed down, and then he delivered a message that made everyone present unable to remain calm. "Marshal, Lieutenant General Loya, wake up." Boom. At this moment, a bright light suddenly flashed outside, accompanied by the deafening sound of thunder. Pouring rain fell on the earth. Click. Sengoku slowly put down the phone bug, tidied up his clothes, stood up, and said to the 5 old stars, "Then everyone. It seems that I have to go back first. This time. Don't worry, you can think about it slowly." The blonde old man in a yuhi suit said calmly, "You have to trust us, Sengoku. Just as we trust you." Understood. Sengoku put the phone bug in kabuto and gave a solemn salute to the 5 old stars. Farewell. Malin Fodor is not far from the Holy Land Marijoa. With the power of a naval warship, it only takes a few hours to run back and forth. And at Sengoku's insistence, the warship was overloaded. In just an hour, he saw the 2 huge Chinese characters on the front of the headquarters fortress. At this moment, the headquarters can still see many people sitting on the ground in confusion, and it seems that they have not recovered. In the terrifying pressure that suddenly erupted, these busy soldiers were stunned without a trace of defense. Some people still had wounds on their heads, which were caused by fainting while carrying goods, and the goods on their hands fell and smashed out. What's more, Sengoku saw a place on fire from a distance, and a large number of soldiers were running on the path beside the artificial lake with buckets. Really, no worries at all. Sengoku complained with a smile, and continued walking towards his office. Squeak. The door of the office was pushed open, and stepping in, Sengoku glanced at the circle of Navy bosses around the conference table, and then focused his attention on the only unfamiliar man present. Looking at the ferocious leaning horn rising from the other side's head, then comparing his height with the person in his memory, and finally carefully observing the other side's clean face, Sengoku asked hesitantly, "You are Loya?" "Wow, cough cough." Almost choking on the rice ball, Loya slapped her chest hard, took a sip, and replied with a smile, "Why, don't you know me? I just had plastic surgery." No, you are a completely changed person. Restore it again." Sengoku looked at Loya in surprise, but fortunately, Loya's voice didn't change. It was still so cheap, it made him feel heartbeat. Hate that Kiba tickles that kind of heartbeat. Later, with the proof of Aokiji and others, Sengoku finally believed that the person in front of him was Loya. Then, he extended his hand to Loya. "Welcome back, Loya." Loya released his hand from the stake, wiped the oil stain on the napkin, and extended his hand with a smile. "Long time no see, Marshal Sengoku." After a simple exchange between the two sides, Lieutenant General Crane coughed twice, interrupting everyone's meal. "Then, tell me about you, Loya. Especially your current strength. At present, what the Navy is most concerned about is the power struggle between the upper 5 old stars and the Antonio family. But because of the existence of Loya, the Navy has also become that unintentional third-party force. This is not to say that the other 2 forces are afraid of being an enemy of Loya. After all, they are the existences that rule the world. If there is no trump card, I am afraid they will be overthrown long ago. What they are worried about is that once Loya intervenes in the power struggle, no matter who he ends up falling for, it will cause great losses to one of the parties, greatly weaken the strength of the party, and give the other party an opportunity to take advantage of it. In the face of Loyana's superior combat power, no one wants to be the unlucky one, so they are all trying to win over Sengoku. But all of this is based on sufficient strength. The current Loya feels like an ordinary person, with a small breath and a dull look, and I don't know if there is that kind of terrifying power. Therefore, Lieutenant General Crane asked this question. Hearing the Crane's question, Loya raised her head and smiled. Are you worried about Mary Joa? I just heard from Mr. Kuzan. Feeling the eyes projected from the surroundings, Aokiji pulled down his blindfold silently. I don't think there is any need to hide this from Loya. After all, he is the key factor. Disclosing confidential information without permission will deduct 100,000 military exploits from you. Sengoku glanced at Aokiji and immediately gave a punishment. Cough. Actually, I still have some opinions on this matter. After cheating his teacher, Loya said to Sengoku and others as if nothing had happened, we don't need to worry about this or that. I believe that as long as I exist, they don't dare to make things bigger. The kind of situation that Mr. Kuzan said can only happen to reckless men, and it will never happen to those old foxes. Which case? Of course a war broke out. Oh, tell me why. Sengoku was interested and brought a plate in front of him. After all, there is still so much food on the table, don't eat it and waste it. Afterwards, Loya spoke out his conjecture. The 5 old stars in the Antonio family have such scruples about the Navy, it is conceivable that even if their trump cards can defeat, or even kill themselves, they will never have the energy to deal with the opponent. So look at this from a different direction, and boldly imagine, if they really make a big deal of it, even to the point where they have exhausted their cards, wouldn't they be worried about the existence of Loya? Obviously not possible. I was so scruples before, but I didn't care when I ran out of ammunition in the end. That's not in line with the style of politicians. Don't look at the urgency of the situation now, all day long as if a world war is about to break out in the next second. In fact, in Loya's eyes, this is actually an alien version of the Cold War period. The current 5 old stars in the Antonio family are the furry bears and bald eagles on the earth. All day long with the opponent as the imaginary enemy, he will formulate various tactical exercises, research various cutting-edge technologies, and compete for comprehensive strength in all aspects. Then, did they really dare to give up their gains to make the world peaceful? Of course dare. But more people don't dare. And now, he is the nuclear weapon they fear. So Loya felt that there was no need to worry about this matter. The few white hairs of Sengoku are completely white. As for my strength. Speaking of this, Loya smiled faintly, threw the bones in his hand in the air, and then there was no more. That bone was like an image on the screen, still there. I can only say that I am stronger than before. Chapter 409 Unless I leave. Everyone stared at that bone in awe, even if it was just an ordinary pig bone, but after enjoying the baptism of the shocked gazes of the admiral and the generals, it would turn into a unusual bone. Of course, what surprised everyone was not the bones themselves, but the state of the bones. Freeze. Space-time. Sengoku murmured the power that they had always suspected, and then, except for Garp and Zepha, who already knew about it, everyone else turned their heads and stared at Loya with awe. Freeze time and space. How could he do such a thing? There is no shortage of devil fruits linked to time and space in the world of One Piece. On the contrary, there are quite a few such fruits. But there has never been any fruit ability that can freeze time and space so easily and freely. Even if it's just an ordinary pig bone, it means that Loya has accomplished an incredible feat. After enjoying everyone's eyes, Loya snapped his fingers, let the bones fall on the table, and splashed a pot of soup everywhere. Then he said with a smile, so you don't have to worry about them making things worse. As long as they dare, I have the ability to completely destroy their everything. What an arrogant tone. But with this power, Loya does have that confidence. Seeing everyone fell into contemplation, Loya silently picked up the soup pot and sucked the delicious old wine. Although it can be said that, in fact, the operation here is too difficult, and Sengoku will not agree with Loya to do it. And, in fact, his ability and what Sengoku and the others thought were not the same thing. This is the new ability that Loya realized after returning from the dream. According to Edith, the nightmares in the fantasy world he was in had been rejecting him all the time, but he had just ignored him. So the question is, how does the fantasy nightmare generally exclude him as an alien? If you directly squeeze him out of the world of One Piece, then it is better to let him stay honest in the world of One Piece. After all, doing so will create a direct connection between fantasy and dream, and each connection may bring more anomalies. Therefore, the usual practice of nightmares is to temporarily solidify the space and time where the foreign body is located, remove the place where the foreign body exists like an operation, and keep it at the end of the world. Nightmares are born from illusions, which are equivalent to the controllers of illusions. It is very normal to do this kind of thing. Then, waiting for a period of peace between the dreams to appear, and when you are sure that the surrounding illusions will not have too much influence on you, will the time and space wrapped with foreign objects secrete little by little. In the dream world, it is then handed over to the guardian to collect it and send it away. After Loya understood the working principle of nightmare, the first thing that came to his mind was the knowledge of cell division learned in the biology class of junior high school. It is precisely because he understands this truth that Loya can show this kind of power. It wasn't that his individual froze the time and space, but the kind of fluctuations belonging to foreign objects that he spread out, attracting the nightmare, and the time and space were frozen by the nightmare's instinctive cleaning program. As a being out of this world, Loya said that this kind of operation is easy. It's just that when the fluctuation dissipates and the nightmare finds that this thing really belongs to the illusion, the freeze will end. Thanks to those unconscious, hard-working model workers' dreamland nightmare. It is heat sheet they exist that allows Loya to use this ability as a regular skill. You don't have to worry about being annoyed by the other party's many mistakes and suddenly malfunctioning. Of course, this is the most common way of clearing nightmares, not the only one. They also have other abilities to remove foreign objects. Just like when Loya was once trapped in the memory prison, it was also a way to clear nightmares. Sengoku stared at the soup splashing on the table. If it had been placed before, he would definitely have roared loudly, and at the same time sent Loya flying with a single shot of the dragon fist. But he is not going to do that now, not because he is also afraid of Loya's power, but because of what Loya said. He looked at Loya seriously. Are you saying that the Navy will be the enemy of the world government? Sengoku is a very traditional man, and his loyalty is impeccable, otherwise he would not have been a marshal. Now Loya's words undoubtedly showed his attitude towards the world government and the Tianlong people, and Sengoku had to think about how to convince Loya. Yes, persuade. The Navy, after all, is an institution under the world government. If Loya's existence is against customers, this is something that this era and the world will not accept. It is even said that there is no need for pressure from the world government, and there will be countless voices of opposition within the Navy. Betrayal is an absolute prohibition in this world. Seeing Sengoku's eyes, Loya understood what he wanted to say. However, even if we don't do that, will they still trust us as before? Marshal Sengoku, Loya whispered. The world government used to trust the Navy, no doubt about that. Such important things as the execution of One Piece's son and the destruction of O'Hara were not done by themselves, which is enough to show their trust in the Navy. Even if there is a little friction between the two sides, it is a normal power struggle. After all, this is a world where power is the main theme, and those in power will naturally not allow the strength of their institutions to escape their control. But the appearance of Loya, especially the power he displayed after he became a dragon, broke the shackles that the world government had always had above the Navy, allowing the power of the Navy to be independent and stand alone on the sea. So ask yourself, who in power would continue to trust such subordinates? Loya's question is helpless, but very realistic. Faced with this question, Sengoku was speechless for a long time. He is not a saint, nor can a saint be a marshal. Just like Dorag and Drake who betrayed the Navy before, if they abandoned the dark to return to the Navy family at this moment, Sengoku asked himself that he couldn't trust them like before. So the worst plan that Loya made was actually a doomed fact. Seeing that Sengoku fell silent, the rest of the bigwigs present also kept silent. The words are not rough, and Loya used his usual violent style to put the truth Yuhi in front of everyone's eyes. Now there are only two ways for the Navy to choose one side to join, such as being loyal to the world government and helping to eliminate the Antonio family who tried to stage a coup d'état. Either stay on your own, don't speak out in the coup d'état, and continue as you are. But no matter what they choose, they are destined to drift away from the world government and those in power. If nothing major happens, this kind of alienation will last for a long, long time beyond the imagination of ordinary people. It's definitely not a scene that everyone expects to see. Unless. At this moment, Zephyr raised his eyelids and looked at the somewhat unfamiliar Loya in front of him. This is what you planned, or you didn't know about it in advance, Loya? Feeling Zephyr's gaze, Loya smiled at him, and at the same time, Aokiji also pushed up the blindfold. Sengoku's eyebrows were wrinkled even deeper, deep enough to trap flies. The expressions of the people around are so weird, and the rest of them naturally won't feel it. Lieutenant General Crane first frowned at everyone, then suddenly realized a key point, slapped the table and stood up. Sengoku, shouldn't you be? Lieutenant General Crane's words were like a thunderclap that penetrated everyone's brains. Even Garp, the most unreliable person on weekdays, immediately understood at this moment. Unless the Navy loses its voice in this power struggle. Unless Loya left the Navy. Chapter 410 I am from outside. Only a Navy without threat can reassure the two forces, and only a Navy without threat can continue to exist. Peace requires more than hard work, but also sacrifice and sacrifice. And all this can actually be avoided with a simple solution. That is, when Loya leaves, the Navy loses the Shanghai Shenzhen, which is enough to change the situation of the war. I firmly disagree. Zephyr stood up abruptly, expressing his position loudly. We have already succumbed to compromise so many times, do we have to compromise this time? Are you willing? Besides, Luo once Ya leaves, if the world government strikes us again, we will have no way to resist. Zephyr is not alarmist. In fact, this kind of thing has long been commonplace and not surprising. However, in the past, the world government would only make arrangements for a certain figure in the Navy during the period when the Navy was prosperous, so as to weaken the strength of the Navy and continue to control it. But this time, it was obviously more serious than ever. No, I think I can give it a try. The person who spoke was Akainu, who had been silent from the beginning, and his words caused everyone to look sideways, considering why he would agree to this. A plan that went against his absolute justice stance. Akainu, like Kizaru, has not expressed his own views until this point in the meeting. In terms of their relationship with Loya, the two of them cannot be compared with Aokiji and Zephyr. In terms of IQ, they can't compete with General Crane and Sengoku. Even the simplest intelligence, they obviously don't know as much as Garp this bastard. So until now, both of them have acted as observers, trying to keep up with the rhythm of everyone's conversation. By the way, it was a great day today. First, Loya woke up, demonstrated the terrifying power of time and space freezing, and then stated the facts, clearly putting the situation that the Navy will face in front of everyone. Finally, combined with various circumstances, the only way is pointed out. Kizaru is still hesitating whether Loya's departure is a good thing. But unexpectedly, Akainu has already made an answer. Ah, Sakazuki, you are really decisive. Kizaru was as wretched as ever, teasing Akainu. Then, can you tell us your reason? Not only Kizaru, but everyone else looked up at Akainu, hoping that he could give a definitive answer. Feeling the eyes of everyone, Akainu held his hands with a serious expression. The Navy will always be an institution under the world government. I believe no one will question this. Hearing this, everyone nodded. To be honest, even if they are allowed to replace the world government to rule the world now, I have nothing in my heart. Isn't it clear? The Navy was Yuhi Gugwo's combat unit from the very beginning, and each member had an identity based on combat effectiveness, and had never been exposed to the above-mentioned so-called rights. Even if everyone disagrees, it is impossible for them to take power, they will just screw things up. And let the old foxes continue to control the power. That is even more unrealistic. Besides, they are in power, and the devil knows how much trouble will be caused. The people present are not ambitious heroes, and let tens of millions of people die in the fire of war because of their own decisions, which goes against their justice and deserves the name of the Navy's justice. Therefore, everyone present was very clear about their own positioning. It is an inevitable and necessary fact that the Navy will always be an institution under the world government. Seeing everyone nodding, Akainu heaved a sigh of relief and continued, since it is meaningless to this point, then Loya's departure is inevitable. Akainu narrowed his eyes slightly. Have you forgotten that Loya still has the blood of Tianlong people in his hands? Yes, and this thing. Sengoku and others widened their eyes in surprise. They forgot about such an important matter. Although it was only a collateral member of the Assos family, he was originally meant to be pushed out as cannon fodder, and used to give the 5 old stars an account of abandonment. But before that, Loya killed him on Crisvia Island. In this kind of thing, the problem is not how powerful the Athos family can rank among the Tianlong people. It doesn't matter how many privileges the Tianlong people enjoy, whether the Navy can offend. The real key point is that through this behavior, Loya has permanently isolated himself from the upper layers, and there is no room for relaxation. What this incident revealed was the essence of Loyana, who was not afraid of power, and even said that he was lawless. You can disrespect me, but you must obey me. The demands of those in power are actually that simple. And that time of Loya's behavior, although it was suppressed by Sengoku, whether it is Wu Laoxing or Tianlongren, it has already marked Loya as a must-kill. An existence that refuses to obey discipline, ignores regulations, and even has no respect or fear for the ruler. In all fairness, how can the 5 old stars allow Loya to continue at ease? The answer is of course no. And a third. Akainu didn't wait for the others to recover and continued to speak. There's actually a third. Yes. He turned his head to look at Loya, who had just closed his eyes and rested, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Thirdly, it is Loya's own thoughts. Marshal Sengoku. Akainu stood up and gave Sengoku a military salute. Although the old man and others didn't know much, they are not fools. Regarding what you are planning, these two I've heard of it over the years. Oh, what did you find? Sengoku put his hand on the table and asked quietly. Lieutenant General Loya, in fact, you have already made plans to leave the Navy from the very beginning. Akainu smiled faintly and said word by word, Hunter, Jones, traitor Bringdrake, the devil's son Nicole Robin, these people are not only alive now, but also working for you. What? This time, not only Lieutenant General Crane and Kizaru, who knew nothing about the matter, but even Zephyr and Sengoku, who already knew about it, stood up in shock. Nicole Robin. Aokiji murmured the name. It was his good friend Saren, who would not hesitate to reprimand himself and even sacrifice his life to protect. Perhaps what Saren wants to protect is not Nico Robin, but that he has long been disappointed with the justice of the Navy and wants to protect the only remaining justice in his heart. But no matter what, Loya actually knew the existence of Robin, and Robin is still working for him. When did it happen? Loya, what the hell is going on? Zephyr hated the iron and looked at him. His disciple was so close to a dangerous person like Nicole Robin. This was completely out of the plan to destroy the Chiwahai system. Whether it's Jones or Drake, they know this and understand Loya's purpose. But Nico Robin, involving ancient texts that endanger the world, is definitely not something that Loya should touch. After the words were finished, a large amount of magma suddenly appeared all over Akainu's body, and it seemed that he was ready to take action. The power of the general shakes the sky and shakes the earth. Those two real eyes were placed on him, which made Loya feel the pressure that he had not seen for a long time. I was stared at by Akainu before, and I have lost my combat effectiveness. For some reason, Rojas suddenly recalled the first time he faced Akainu face to face in the courtyard of the elite camp. The pressure that Akainu brought to him at that time was so terrifying, just one look made him feel the pain of suffocation. And now. But that's all. Akainu, you. Seeing Akainu's posture, Zephyr was just about to say something, but he suddenly found that a drop of sweat dripped on the other's forehead. Akainu, are you afraid? Zephyr thought in a daze, then followed the other party's gaze, which happened to meet Loya's indifferent gaze. What a terrible look it was. With just one glance, Zephyr saw the illusion of his own death. Even though Loya had no ill intentions towards him, that domineering aura had already broken through his line of defense and destroyed his soul. So, after Akainu, Zephyr was also stagnant. Loya, what are you doing? Sengoku shouted aggressively, golden light flashing on his body, and he couldn't look directly like a god. At Sengoku's question, Loya blinked and turned her head. What? Of course I'm helping you decide. He smiled, tore off the napkin between his collars, and bowed slightly to everyone present. I really appreciate everyone's care during this time. Let's get to know each other again. Inshallah Loya, the Ice Dragon Slayer. Ice Dragon Slayer Wizard. What is that? Isn't Loya the phantom beast with the Ice Dragon fruit ability? And, slaying dragons. You, don't you? Suddenly, Sengoku immediately made up a terrifying possibility. Destroying the dragon and destroying the dragon. Loya himself is a giant dragon, so who is he going to destroy? There was only one answer, and it was the one they worried about the most. The dragon that Loya wants to destroy is Tianlongren. For this kind of thing, Loya can only sigh at the greatness of the coincidence, and then follow the other party's words. Yes, the existence of the next is to destroy the Tianlong people. Let this world get rid of the oppression of ignorance, and put the world on the right track. And, I will build a new regime and rule the world. Gollum. No matter who it was, in the face of Loya's arrogant speech, they were deeply shocked at this moment, and swallowed their saliva involuntarily. Zephyr and Aokiji were the first to know Loya and looked at him in surprise. Not to mention the other big guys who didn't know it at all, they only felt extremely cold at the moment. Representing the rising newcomer of the Navy, it turns out that his purpose is to rule the world. All this time, they have been kept in the dark. At the moment when everyone expressed their shock, Lieutenant General Crane suddenly said, Dragon Slayer, is this an ability that has been lost in this world? Since the two sides could no longer ease, Crane quickly returned to his role. The General Staff of the Navy Headquarters not only needs to give advice to the Navy, but also means that she needs to collect all possible intelligence for the Navy. For this question, Loya smiled inscrutable. No, I'm from beyond. Chapter 411, get your hands on it. Out of the sky. Several Navy bosses frowned in unison, thinking about where the sky in Loya's mouth would be. Empty island. No, the existence of the Sky Island has long been known to the Navy, and the people there do use different powers from the Blue Sea people they say, but it is still within everyone's cognition. But what Loya showed was a special power that they had never seen before. The power of magic. Oh, heaven, where is it? Lieutenant General Crane said in a calm tone, wanting to get more information. The ability to wash the fruit can not only be used to eliminate the evil thoughts of others, but also to make one's own thoughts accessible, exuding a kind of natural and ultimate kindness. No matter how desperately she wanted to know everything about Loya, and how much anger she felt about Loya's behavior, at this moment, Lieutenant General Crane was like a kind old grandmother next door, and people couldn't help but want to get close, complain to her, tell her everything. The older generation of the Navy is really not a fuel-efficient lamp. Loya was a little lost and looked at her blankly. But just when he thought that Loya would speak, the corners of his mouth moved, and a mocking smile appeared. Guess. This sentence is a fuse. Knowing that the Crane can't use the fruit ability to get more information, Sengoku decisively gave the order, do it. This time, you really got into trouble, Loya. Aokiji was talking, ignoring that this was Sengoku's office. The cold air spread out in an instant, and a big bird quickly condensed and formed. Broken pheasant mouth. He is Loya's teacher. At this moment when Zephyr is unable to fight, he must be the first to stand up and show his position. Otherwise, Loya's efforts will be in vain. He knew that Loya was not afraid of his own ice, and the purpose of Aokiji was only to force Loya out of the fortress. Otherwise, with so many people working together, let alone this headquarters fortress, the entire Malenford is in danger of being destroyed. But, facing the extremely dangerous ice bird released by the green pheasant, Loya smiled and opened his mouth wide in the shocked eyes of everyone. Not good. Sengoku raised his eyebrows and rushed up abruptly. Roha's roaring skills are so powerful that even he can't help but want to copy them on Vegapunk's robots. Pacifists, and the harbinger of that move is to open his mouth. Take a breath. Here comes the roar of the ice dragon, not to mention what will happen to them, then the staff of the entire fortress will lose their lives in the terrifying cold. So Sengoku wants to stop Loa's attack. However, this time he guessed wrong. When he moved to Roha's side, he found that Roha did not condense the familiar blue formation. On the contrary, Aokiji's violent pheasant mouth was so unreserved, hitting his cheek. Pretend to be hurt to gain trust. Sengoku thought so. However, what happened to Loya the next moment made him gasp in surprise. I saw that the huge ice bird that almost filled the entire office suddenly disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the surging cold was also rapidly dissipating, but in a short time, Loya's face disappeared from behind the ice bird. Exposed. And he, with his mouth open, was eating the ice cubes of the green pheasant with a big mouth. Yes, he ate Aokiji's violent pheasant mouth face to face. And as he ate the ice cubes, the absolutely chilling cold air around his body expanded and emerged from his body. Even Fujitora could see that Roha became stronger by eating ice cubes. Stop him! Sengoku shouted loudly, golden light flashed on his palm, and slammed into Loya. Boom! With the violent shaking, the office on the 21st floor of the naval headquarters burst with a bang. Even on the other side of the island, the thick smoke emanating from here can be seen. What happened? What happened? That golden light, is it Marshal Sengoku or General Kizaru? Could it be that Lieutenant General Loya is causing trouble again? Why should I say it again? Hearing this guess, combined with someone's consistent behavior, the Navy soldiers expressed their tiredness. Hey, we will repair it later. You guys really don't care about the people below you. Then the soldiers continued to go their separate ways. Back to Sengoku's office. Well, the former office. When the smoke cleared, everyone looked at the ruins where Loya was, and suddenly took a breath. I saw that the ice bird in front of Loya had been destroyed by the aftermath of the attack and scattered all over the place, and he was turning his head indifferently, looking at Sengoku with blue veins on his forehead. Sengoku of the Buddha, is that what you are capable of? Sengoku's attack did hit Loya, but he blocked Sengoku's Buddha's impact with just one hand. And looking at the struggling expression on Sengoku's face, it was obvious that he had used all his strength. It's really terrifying, terrifying. Seeing this scene, Huang Yuan was no longer as wretched as he used to be, and became extremely serious. Now Loya is very strong, they are very clear about this. But as a former general and now a marshal, Sengoku's strength is beyond doubt. But what happened now? This is no longer a one-sided crush, but a complete ignorance. I'm out of luck, you guys come on. Qingzi looked at Loya in astonishment, then spread out his hands and sat back in his chair. Not to mention attribute restraint, it's okay to ignore elementalization, but the opponent's ice was eaten by the opponent, which instead enhanced the opponent's strength. This is a snake skin. Ming dog. Laser. Naturally, Kasaragi and Akainu would not watch Roha leave, especially the former. After a brief absence, their attacks also bombarded Roha. If the soldiers thought it was Loya who made trouble for Sengoku before, Then with the appearance of the lava dog and the dazzling golden light, no matter how slow people are, they realize that something terrible has happened. The last time Loya made a move in the headquarters was not small, causing more than half of the entire naval headquarters to catch a cold, which attracted the three generals to take action. So what happened this time? But no matter what happened, looking at the performance of the generals, it was obvious that they wanted to catch Loya. So a group of soldiers, under the command of the captain, skillfully sorted out their weapons, ready to set out to capture Loya. In the villa area of the lieutenant general not far from the fortress of the headquarters, a purple-haired flying squirrel with a Mohican hairstyle stood up holding a sword, frowned deeply at the movement coming from the direction of the fortress. Loya. Not only him, but the rest of the bosses of the headquarters are all nervously watching the headquarters fortress at the moment. There are Huoshin, Dalmesia, Mattis, Seaver, Rowe, and Alex, who has just been transferred back to the headquarters from the C9 branch, Ms. S from the recruit camp, and so on, and so on. Loya is familiar and unfamiliar people. They can all see that Akainu and Kizaru are really doing their best. That scene was like dealing with some vicious pirate. While they felt deeply uneasy, there was also a trace of doubt that lingered in their hearts. In the end, what happened? Boom. Crash. The hot magma did not affect Roha at all. He let go of the big hand holding Sengoku's fist and patted it forward. The lava dog that seemed to come from hell wailed and was blasted on the spot. The scattered lava mercilessly ignited the fire, illuminating everyone's faces through Yuhi. With a slight tilt of his head, Loya avoided the laser that Kisumura drilled through the magma, and smiled and shrugged to everyone. That's why I didn't tell you before. But it's better to end here. Saying that, two wings that covered the sky suddenly rose from behind Loya. Even though he is now nearly 3 meters tall, he is not much better than Aldo, but the pair of wings is still huge and exaggerated. If you want to go, have you asked me? Karp clenched the Kiba pass, and the muscles all over his body suddenly swelled in a large circle. Pulling off the cloak from his body, Garp squeezed his fists and slammed it heavily at Loya. Loya has always been curious about Karp's true strength, but unfortunately, until this incident, he never had the opportunity to see Karp's full-strength shot. But now, he knows. That is one, with my invincible fist. Everything in the world trembles under this seemingly ordinary punch. Anything that tries to block it can't resist this punch. Even now, if he was hit by Garp, he would still be injured. But it's a pity. Loya smiled softly, and the huge ice wings with a height of 100 meters behind him fanned down overwhelmingly, and the huge naval headquarters was frozen at a speed visible to the naked eye in an instant. Then, boom. Chapter 412 Bounty, 10 billion Baileys. Cough, cough. Sengoku got up from the rubble panting, looking around nervously. Suddenly his eyes lit up, and he shouted at a figure, "Cap, are you all right?" But the figure didn't answer his question, and remained motionless in his fist-pushing posture. Could it be? Sengoku was immediately startled by his own guess, and quickly stood up and ran over, but when he was about to reach out to touch Garp, Garp moved himself. As soon as he can move, Garp is like drowning, desperately breathing the fresh air. Who, Sengoku, are you all right? Looking at the old comrade in arms who came to his side, Karp asked with concern. I'm fine, but, looking back at the ruins around him, Sengoku sighed with dim eyes, he's gone. Sorry. No, Sengoku shook his head and comforted Garp. In the face of the power of time and space freezing, our fundamentals can't help Loya. After Sengoku and Garp, the rest of the people also broke free from the freeze. Everyone looked at the surrounding ruins with a bit of disappointment, and did not recover for a long time. A few days later, a news that shook the world spread across the sea. The top combat power of the Navy headquarters, the legendary Dragon. Vice Admiral Christopher Loya has defected from the Navy. For a while, no matter who it is or what force it is, all tensely stop all actions, and always pay attention to the movement of the sea. At the same time, the latest issue of the reward order urgently issued by the world government spread to every corner of the world. Looking at the long list of numbers on it, even the big figures who have seen the world, were suddenly held their breath in fright. 8 zeros after 1 is 100 million, and 9 zeros is 1 billion. And for this legendary trader, his bounty was set at a terrifying 11-digit figure. A bounty of 10 billion Baileys. What is this concept? Even if the current 4 emperors add up, there is no bounty of 10 billion Baileys. In other words, in the eyes of the world government, the existence of Loya is more threatening than all the 4 emperors combined. Otherwise, it would not have set this incredible number. At the same time, the landmark building of the Navy headquarters, Nikui's headquarters fortress, also completely collapsed in the attack when Loya left. Admiral Sengoku of the Navy headquarters and the rest of the generals shot together and did not leave him behind. This is power beyond everyone's imagination. It is precisely because of this news that everyone understands that the world government is not specifically targeting Loya. Now he has the absolute power that matches the bounty. The power above the 4 emperors. But the question is, where is such a terrifying existence now? For a time, the whole sea was quietly watching the development of things. In addition, there are gossips that the ice dragon Loya did not cut off his friendship with the Navy. When he left, even if he destroyed the fortress of the headquarters, no one died. Of course, this news was quickly covered by various versions of grievances and hatreds, and quickly dissipated in all kinds of complicated information. Just kidding. The fortress of the headquarters has collapsed. You told me that no one died. What's wrong with you? But no matter what, in the winter of 1518 in the Sea Garden calendar, the whole world remembered the name Loya and the long list of dazzling bounties. And even after dozens or hundreds of years, this legend will not be forgotten. The Great Root, in a no man's land of the New World. Before, this place did not belong to the sphere of any influence. Because there is nothing but a sea here. Even if the Navy wants to build a base here, it is not easy to do. However, since Jones on Cannibal Island emerged a year ago and showed his mighty power, this place has become the territory of the new king, Chiwahai, alien, Jones. Many people have challenged the previously unknown Great Pirate Jones, but of course, their challenge is just to add a point to Jones' record and make Cannibal Island's reputation even more prominent. Cannibal Island, come and go. With the return of the survivors who did not land on the island, this title slowly spread out, leaving one less road for pirates to step into the new world. This situation is very happy to see the world government, because Jones' existence not only fills a blank area in the new world, but also makes a penultimate contribution to the fight against pirates. The meaning of Chiwahai's existence, shouldn't it be like this? However, today's Cannibal Island is a little different from the past. All the figures on the island who were busy and engaged in construction in the past have disappeared, and even the cluttered forest is silent at this moment. All these changes are due to the coming of that one. Sitting on Jones' former seat, Loya elegantly sliced the steak and chewed it in small bites. The bright lights and pleasant music make people mistakenly think that this is the royal meeting place, not the fabled and terrifying man-eating island. In the positions of his left and right hands, Robin and Jones cut the steak in front of them with stiff expressions. The juicy steak in the past was now tasted like wax in their mouths. Of course they are not afraid of Loya, except for those who have been resurrected and animals like Steel Shadow, who will have an instinctive fear of Loya. Usually, Loya feels the same as Lieutenant General Crane. People are calm and approachable. What they were worried about was actually the unrest that would be caused by Loya's actions. Loya has already told them what happened, so the question is, where did Akainu get such detailed information? You must know that this is something that Sengoku is not clear about. Akainu is a guy with stronger hands-on ability than brains. How can he get past Sengoku to get information? With his level and power, the one who can tell him this must be some existence in the world government. That is to say, Jones of the Remnant of Assos, Nicole Robin of the Devil's Son, the news that they are still alive, the world government knows all about it. Loya had to leave the Navy because of covering them up, so what about them? The location of Chihuahua definitely can't protect them. What, not to taste? Feeling the abnormality of the two, Loya raised his head, and a pair of golden vertical pupils stared straight at the two, with an irresistible majesty in his words. This. Jones shook his hands, not knowing how to answer. After all, Loya is the boss. Since he has decided to fight against the world government, how can they be afraid? Indeed, Loya is very strong, so powerful that the Navy does not dare to act rashly even knowing that he is here. But the world government is not a fuel-efficient lamp. Their trump card is the same as what Aokiji once persuaded Loya to mention, it is enough to sweep everything. Loya may not be afraid, but what about them? Jones, who was born in the Athos family, and Robin, who had been hiding in the dark for more than 20 years, really didn't have the courage to fight against the world government. If it's unpalatable, I should say it too. The one who spoke now was Rockdoll, who was chopping the delicious steak with a knife, then took out a sealed tin can from under the table. As soon as it was opened, there was a pungent fishy smell inside, which was unique to raw meat, not smelly, but unacceptable. Especially when everyone enjoys the high-level Beihai band and tastes Yuhi wine and food. Robin covered his nose in disgust, frowned and said, "Didn't I put all the raw meat in the kitchen in the refrigerator? Where did you get it so fresh?" "Ha, ha, ha. I just said where the food I just put in the kitchen went to, it's you." K. Rockdale snorted and took out a fresh, washed piece from the jar liver and plump fresh beef tenderloin. "I'm dead, sis. You let me eat cooked food, are you trying to abuse me?" Because of the relationship between the two, K. Rockdale and Nicole Robin were a little bit uncomfortable. As long as they seized the opportunity, the two always liked to block each other. Humph. Robin Sunere snorted and didn't answer K. Rockdale's words. After all, whether alive or dead, she is no match for K. Rockdale. This made her want to take revenge and the other party had no way. And all of this is because of Loya's gift. Thinking of this, Robin looked at Loya resentfully, as if blaming something. Of course, Loya said I didn't know anything, and then comforted Jones. "I know what you're worried about, but don't worry, they don't dare to provoke me now." "You know what you have in mind," Jones replied, continuing to eat dinner. "Huh, is there a guest here?" Jones turned around in surprise, feeling the breath of the person coming. "I am still an acquaintance, Captain." Chapter 413 Family, Food, Friends. The world government did not dare to disturb Loya. Aside from his own super strength, the world government itself is already in chaos. The fortress needs to be rebuilt. This is a big project. Anyway, there will be no new houses in a month or two. Sitting in the makeshift office, Sengoku rubbed his temples and sighed heavily. Hey, it's really messed up. In the past few days, with the disappearance of Loya, the two forces also understood the intention of the Navy, so they calmed down and tested each other. Conflicts occurred frequently, and they competed for the control of the world government. However, none of them dared to do anything to the Navy. Even if Loha left the Navy, he was offered a bounty of 10 billion, a symbol that was larger than the actual reward, but as long as he was not blind, he would understand that Loya's heart was still on the side of the Navy. Otherwise, such a big building collapsed, and no one died. Don't tell me it's a coincidence. At the last moment, Loya used his ability to freeze time and space to freeze all the people around and inside the entire fortress. The original purpose of this was to avoid interfering with the illusion itself, and of course the nightmare would not allow those foreign objects to be stimulated. As a result, even though more than 10 tons of reinforced concrete fell on the head, even the most common little cat in the fortress was not harmed. It's just that with Loya's departure, the situation in the sea has become really complicated now. A year ago, the pirates of this world were the source of the chaos. However, with the plan made by Loya in Alabasta, thousands of big pirates were completely wiped out in the subsequent riots. Those are all big pirates active on the Great Route. A monster who is completely different from those newcomers from the world. There are not a few powerful people who are even living in the New World. As a result, it was destroyed. In the collective execution of hundreds of big pirates held by the Navy, their blood not only established the absolute position of the Navy in the Great Sea Route, but also caused countless little pirates who were struggling to survive directly to dissolve. If there is no hope, how can we work hard? The era of the great pirates created by Roger appeared like never before, the day when the Navy completely overwhelmed the pirates. But now, chaos again. Because of the nonsense of the world government, the Navy had to give up Loya, and his departure also rekindled the fire of hope for the pirates. Yes, it is not as serious as outsiders imagined. Even if Loya takes Nicole Robin, the son of the devil, as his subordinate, it will not be enough to shake the bond between him and the Navy. Don't overestimate the integrity of politicians. If Loya directly chooses to join one of the parties, it is not a problem to cancel Robin's bounty after they win. Just rule the world. What are you thinking, Loya? Thinking back on what Loya said when he left, Sengoku couldn't tell how much truth there was or how false it was. Is that his sincerity, or is it for Akainu to act? Nobody made it clear. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door of the office. Sengoku responded, and saw Aokiji Kabuto walking in with his pants on. Kuzan, how about it? Have you determined Loya's location? Well, I found it. He came to sit down opposite Sengoku. Aokiji took a cup of water and took a sip. He is currently on vacation on the cannibal island of Shichibukai Jones. If nothing else, his next goal is to Chiwahai is gone. The King's 7 Wuhai. Do you still remember your original plan? Sengoku sighed melancholy. During this period of time, he had not had a day of rest, and with all kinds of troubles, he had aged a lot. Then leave him alone, at least so far he hasn't caused any trouble for us. Well, I think so too. Aokiji agreed and continued drinking tea. Moreover, there is one sentence Sengoku didn't say. Even if Loya went to kill Shichibukai one by one, the world government probably wouldn't have time to trouble him. After all, how could things get any worse? After speaking, Sengoku and Aokiji fell into silence, one drinking tea and the other working on documents. Dong dong dong. Come in. Lieutenant Colonel Minnie, what's the matter with you? It was Joan's sister who knocked on the door, the only orphan of the Athos family, Athos Minnie. A year later, Minnie is a little weaker and more capable than before. Her eyes are no longer so burning and pressing, and there is a little more calm and indifference. A hard-working genius, this is the comment that Loya gave her in the elite assessment. And the fact is exactly like this. Minnie's efforts, even if the man sees it, he will look at him. It took only 1 year for the newcomer at the bottom of his graduation to become a lieutenant colonel, and the grief in this is not enough for outsiders. Sengoku doesn't want to see Minnie now because of her special status. In the beginning, she was a secret training spy of the Dragons, a spy in the Navy, and a CP0 reserve. Later, with the fall of the Athos family and the capture of Jones, she changed from a spy to a tainted witness who controlled Jones. And now, because of Loya's exposure and departure, Minnie has become an existence that the three forces of the Navy, the 5 old stars, and the Tianlong people are trying to downplay. Like Sengoku, he hasn't given Minnie any assignments for over a month, which was unbelievable in the past. Ah la la, it looks like the little girl has some grievances against Marshal Sengoku. Shinji took a sip of his tea and stood up slowly. Then I'd better leave as soon as possible, so as not to get angry. After speaking, Aokiji pressed the door that was gradually closing, opened it, and walked out quickly. Well, it's not my fault, Minnie. You know your uniqueness, and I can't let you leave the headquarters at will. Before Minnie started complaining as usual, Sengoku raised his hand decisively in surrender. Now is the period of frequent conflicts between the 5 old stars and the Antonio family, and no one dares to let the sister of Loya's confidant General Jones get into an accident, even if he has said such rebellious words. It took a lot of hard work to get things back under your control. Now, to find trouble with Minnie, wouldn't that make yourself uncomfortable? Even if you really want to deal with Loya, you have to wait for the dust to settle and things become clear. Minnie also knew these things, and Zephyr took the time to solve her. So this time she came to Sengoku, not to ask for a task as before, but to take out a form. Teacher Zephyr has agreed. Marshal Sengoku, please sign it. What is this? Sengoku picked up the form on the table, glanced at it, and the corner of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Zephyr, you bastard. It was a resignation report. After Loya left, the elite camp companions who once belonged to Loya's management were ruled by Zephyr. So at the end of the document, Zephyr wrote the word, agree, with his pen and ink as strong as he looked, and now the signature of Admiral Sengoku is missing. Although he knew he was asking, but Sengoku couldn't help but ask, are you going to find Loya? Family, food, friends, those are the most important things. Minnie didn't answer Sengoku's question, but said what Loya once said, I just wanted to go back to my family. Food, it's really Loya's style. Sengoku smiled and suddenly looked at Minnie seriously. However, are you really sure, Minnie? Do you know how many people will want your life along the way once you leave the Navy headquarters? And I can't give it to you. Offer any protection, even say. In the future, we will be enemies. Of course I know, but no danger can stop my determination to return to my family. Minnie answered Sengoku's question decisively, and suddenly smiled. Also, I didn't leave alone. Sengoku. He quickly used observation haki to sense the situation outside the house and counted the number of people. Sengoku twitched the corner of his mouth and smashed the table in front of him. Zephyr. Chapter 414 Death Knight Rock Doll. A few days later, Chambord, Area 60. I said you guys, you're really not afraid of death. The person who said this was Simon. While watching the coder, film craftsman, too violent coating the sailboat, he carefully installed the small angular nails on one inside a small tube. He has already learned the flying knife technique of Dr. Dorier, but Simon is not ready to copy everything from others. With a smart brain, Simon fully combines his own physique and devil fruit skills to develop some practical technologies that are unique to him. Ah, why do you say that, Simon? Aldo put down the iron tower for exercise and clasped his head in confusion. Isn't it just from here to go to the new world? What does this have to do with not being afraid of death? Simon, I think it's hard for me to explain it to you with your IQ, so I'll pretend I didn't hear it. Simon finished in one breath without punctuation, and then turned around and continued to work on his own. Aludo nodded blankly, suddenly came back to his senses, raised a ton of iron tower in his hand and smashed it at Simon. Bastard. Don't think I don't know that you are calling me stupid. Hee hee, you are really smart. Hearing the tinkling crashing in their ears, Brother Jerome sat on the bank with a picnic cloth in the middle, some snacks on it, and teacups. Look out to the sea and breathe the sea breeze. Well, it's really a peaceful day. Yes, yes. You too, it's enough. If you have time to fight, why don't you come over and help move things in? Tony sneered as he passed by the two of them, calmly avoiding all kinds of flying hidden weapons and splashing stones, and led him behind him. With a bunch of Shampoo's unique bubbles, which are wrapped in various living materials. No, did you hear what I said? Simon stopped and looked at Tony speechlessly. From here to Cannibal Island, there is at least half a month's voyage in the middle. And we are now on ordinary sailboats, not warships, so this time must be calculated at least as a month. A month. Do you know how many attacks we're going to meet? It's a big deal to be sunk. Anyway, I can swim. Aldo looked at Simon with malicious intentions, and looked at the only devil fruit-capable person in the group. Simon, go away. The coder has been working overtime all day and night, and the bubbles on the boat will soon be completed. Tony slowly stuffed the bubbles in his hand from the empty space left, and said to Minnie, who was in charge of receiving on the deck, "Is Ming's still here?" Well, he said there was a chance to see you again, and he didn't know what to do. Not all of the companions chose to leave with Minnie, and not all of those who left were with them. Hearing Minnie's words, Tony said, "Oh," without looking into it. Mingda was very unhappy when he left. He must have something on his mind. Perhaps Simon, the Shane, of the Weston family, would know something, but what's the point of that? If Ming needs it, he will definitely come to them. "Hey, Tony." Aludo ran over, holding up a black cloth in his hand with an ugly skeleton painted on it. "Look, how about the pirate flag I drew?" "Damn it." Tony's face turned black, and a yugi-colored thread shot out, stirring the black cloth in Aldo's hands to a pulp. Looking at Aldo's blank eyes, Tony coughed, turned to the stunned Navy not far away, and said, "Sorry, he's a little overexcited, things are not what you think. After all, these people were all their officers before, so let's just pretend they didn't see them." The two Navy soldiers who were in charge of guarding the gate at the office looked at each other and tacitly said that we didn't hear anything. After a few days of adaptation, the undead and animals on the island gradually became accustomed to the existence of Loya. When he did not step out of the castle, the atmosphere on the island finally returned to the previous scene. Death Knight K. Rockdale, this is Sand Crocodile's new identity. He is responsible for arranging the undead on the island to perform various labors, and undertakes the task of stationing the first line of defense on Turtle Island. Even though the great sword that Roha had made for him did not fit his aesthetic, he was still used to using the Sasori poison needle as a weapon, but he was still a knight. "Sir Crocodile, you need to have a name that matches your identity." Loya answered him like this. "I thought that after a series of incidents, Loya would honestly stay on Turtle Island for vacation, but it's so annoying, is it me again?" His face was colder and paler than when he was alive, but he couldn't hide the disgust on K. Rockdale's face. He took the information that Drake brought back, and curled his lips. "Che, you really treat the dead as coolies. We dead people also have the right to ask for vacation, okay? The resurrected undead are tireless and do not need to eat. As long as the soul flame continues to burn, they can move on forever. It is even said that because of Roha, even if their soul flame is extinguished, it will return to the master's hand, and will never escape the control of Roha. However, this is not the reason why you leave all trivial matters to me, okay? If I can't beat you." Not knowing what K. Rockdale was complaining about, Drake tightened the mask on his face, his voice a little dull. "Come on, isn't it as simple as digging a grave?" Rona went to Dressrosa to spy on Doflamingo. "In fact, nothing has changed." Rockdale stroked the great sword beside him, and tapped his fingers on the skeleton on the hilt. "I don't think you can really deal with flamingos, and the captain must understand this. So after finishing the mission, I still have to go to Dressrosa. I'm so sorry for being held back." Drake turned the Byakugan over and looked at the great sword made of dead bones in disgust. "It is because there are so many things made of the same material, so he has to wear a mask every time he comes." Dong dong dong. The door of the room was pushed open, and an undead with only half of his head walked in. He was wearing an old-fashioned butler's suit and saluted K. Rockdale. "Commander, dinner is ready, do you want to eat here or go to the restaurant?" Hearing his words, K. Rockdale turned to look at Drake and raised his eyebrows. "Want to have something to eat together? Farewell." After all, there was wind under Drake's feet, and he walked quickly around the undead butler and walked out. Seeing him hurriedly running away, K. Rockdale smiled and picked up the information on the table again. He is very clear about Loya's plan, and he also knows that he must show the corresponding value. A chance to declare yourself to the world. What a painstaking effort, Captain. Chapter 415 Ghost Ship Legend. Great Route, New World. The turmoil in the world government didn't have much of an impact here. After all, even when there was no internal turmoil, their intervention in the New World was minimal. So even though the Antonio family and the 5 old stars are almost out of their heads now, the rhythm of the New World is still unhurried. With the 4 emperors sitting here, no pirates can change anything, and the days are flat and peaceful. Maybe calm down. In the vast sea, a pirate ship is slowly heading forward. Judging from the direction they are heading, The destination is the legendary ship of the strongest man in the world, the Moby Dick. Well, the sea is still so calm. Ship, Captain, are you really going to challenge Whitebeard? It was Ace's adjutant, a middle-aged man with brown hair about his height. Even if he was surrounded and suppressed by several naval warships, he could face it with a smile, but he was deeply afraid of the goal of their trip. Ace is indeed very strong, not only a natural fruit person, but also a burning fruit with extremely powerful attack power. Coupled with the fighting skills that he has cultivated since he was a child, the ordinary big pirate is not his enemy at all. But that's the strongest Whitebeard in the world. Why don't you think about it again? The strongest in the world? Ace suddenly laughed. Not necessarily. Speaking of which, it seems that Whitebeard is indeed not the strongest in the world right now. Leaving aside the terrifying dragon who was offered a reward of 10 billion Baileys, Ulysses, who was once defeated by Loya, seems to be no weaker than Whitebeard. A year ago, when he went to fetch Ace from the sea, he saw that so many terrifying people who could be called overlords even in the New World were caught in a Yuhi color in just a few minutes. The figure becomes a man. Even those who were watching from a distance did not escape the catastrophe, and they had no time to react at all, and they were completely sucked dry and fell on the deck. Fortunately, Loya won after that, otherwise the people in Ace's boat will die on the spot. And that's just a clone of the other party. This kind of power has exceeded their imagination. Whitebeard is called the strongest in the world, so I'm afraid it won't exceed this limit, right? But then, Captain, why are you so persistent in challenging Whitebeard? It used to be, and it's fine now. It's clear that the other party doesn't have a few years to live. This problem also accompanied Ace's growth and became a mystery of the Spade Pirates. From Yuhi, they learned about Whitebeard's recent situation, so everyone felt sorry for Whitebeard, and they didn't want to disturb the strongest existence, the last time. Their captain has never been afraid of any challenge, and has never been defeated in any challenge. The co-captain, who has followed him all the way from the East China Sea, knows very well that Ace is not a man of his own accord. He has his own principles and never breaks his own principles. If it weren't for some important reason, he couldn't have such a deep obsession with Whitebeard. Want to prove yourself by challenging the world's strongest? No, the world government has invited him to become Chihuahai so many times, isn't it enough to prove his strength? But he refused. He asked Ace this question, but every time, Ace smiled politely and didn't answer. Just like this time, Ace still just smiled, shook his head and continued to lie down in the sun. But even if he had more doubts in his heart, he could only follow Ace's direction. Who called him his captain? Moreover, to challenge Whitebeard, to challenge the terrifying existence that has stood on the top of the sea since Roger's generation, it is a little exciting to think about it. If he can come back alive, this thing will be enough for him to blow for a lifetime. While the co-captain was fantasizing about his rise to fame and listening to his adventure stories in the tavern Satomi, the crew watching the wind on the mast interrupted him. Captain, there is a ship approaching from the southeast. Oh who? Are there any blind guys coming to fight? The vice-captain cast aside his fantasies and pulled out the machete around his waist with a sullen face. Prepare to fight, little brats. It is unforgivable to dare to disturb his beautiful dream. Commander, the ship is found in the northwest. They have pushed out the artillery, and it looks like they are going to rob us. On the Great Route, there are many people who let their subordinates call themselves the commander, but the one who carried a ship of dead people and set off from the cannibal island was only K. Rockdale. Listening to the report of the Skeleton Brothers, K. Rockdale looked at him with a bewildered expression. Robbery. This is our site, okay. He had just set out to sea, and a large area of the surrounding sea was tacitly regarded as the territory of Alien Jones of Chihuahai. As Chihuahai, they don't go to rob others, but others actually come to rob them. Is there any reason for this? The world has changed. K. Rockdale sighed with emotion that people are not old and moral, and then ordered the undead under his command to dive over and prepare to launch a sneak attack. Since you dare to do it, don't blame me for being ruthless." The men and horses on both sides were ready to act, and the bright swords and swords reflected each other, setting off a chilling atmosphere. Soon, the two sailboats approached and entered the bombardment range of the cannons. Fire! Fire! Bang! Bang! In the roar, a round of artillery shells crossed the sea and smashed heavily on the opponent's deck. It's just that, unlike the cannons fired by the Spade pirates, what K. Rockdale and the others hit were lumps of rotten flesh full of plague. Damn it! What are they launching? Unprepared, Ace's co-captain was smeared by the opponent's shell, and when he wiped it with his hand, a pungent rancid smell shot straight to his forehead, almost making him gasp. "Captain, come and see." A crew member ran over with a telescope and handed it to Ace. I thought the other party was just a little pirate, so Ace, who had never been serious, took the telescope and looked at the other party's boat. That's it, skeletons. There are seaweed and silt everywhere on the ship, as if they have been soaked in the sea for decades, and the guys who operate the artillery are so rotten, some of them are even ventilated, and they can see the scene behind them at a glance. A ghost ship. What, ghost ship? There are always legends of ghost ships on the sea, and as pirates who live on the sea, they are even more familiar with those legends. Seeing the appearance of the other party, I immediately made up dozens of versions of horror stories. And the other party is a ghost ship, and there are no living people on board. How should this battle be fought? Captain. Covered in flesh, the co-captain looked at Ace cautiously, hoping that he would not have a feverish head to compete with the ghost ship. Ah! Enemy attack. Watch out, skeletons are coming from the bottom of the sea. A scream interrupted their conversation. Ace looked back, and sure enough, rotting undead climbed up from the water along the hull and were massacring his crew. Those pirates who were not strong enough to face such terrifying things suddenly panicked and were easily chopped to the ground. This battle can't be fought. Ace made a quick judgment and loudly ordered, "Don't panic. Drive them off. Helmsman, turn the direction quickly and escape from this sea." Yes. Soon, after a group of cadres took action, the undead were thrown down one by one. Seeing this situation, K. Rockdale raised his eyebrows and sighed. Sure enough, the quality is still not good. The undead can only play a role by using human sea tactics. Looking at the direction the other party was leaving, the skeleton brothers asked K. Rockdale, "Do you want to catch up, Commander?" "No need, the task is important." Rockdale shook his head, not wanting to delay the task because of some trivial matter. A few days later, the legend of the ghost ship resounded in the sea again, because this time, it was the famous pirate in the New World, Fire Fist Ace. Chapter 416 Loya going out for a while. Rockdale left Turtle Island, and Nicole Robin suddenly felt that she was idle all of a sudden. Only then did she realize that there was one less target to target. In fact, life on Turtle Island was quite boring. Jones and Drake were busy practicing all day, and their diligence was outrageous. No matter what reason they joined this camp before, but now they do not allow themselves to be the weakest existence. If you ask the reason, you can only get one sentence: for the dignity of men. In this regard, Robin can only sigh, "This is a man." Then he went to Turtle Island's mascot Perona for tea. Losing her physical body, it stands to reason that the dead Perona will also disappear with the disappearance of the fruit ability, but in fact it does not. This question has troubled everyone on Turtle Island for a long time and has not been answered. It was not until Loya came here that they understood the reason after careful study, and corrected their nearly broken three views. The soul itself is a kind of energy, which everyone has long recognized because of the existence of Loya. Perona's out-of-body spirit is different from the ghosts she created in the past. Although it is still a ghost created by the fruit ability, her own soul resides in it, not as she understood it, but her consciousness entered the ghost. So, by chance, when she died, although the outer shell disappeared, her soul remained intact. Before her soul burns out, Perona doesn't have to worry about disappearing. This change is enviable for beauty-loving women. If Loya is willing, Perona's lifespan will never end. Think about it, a little girl who is always so prosperous, pure and not lacking in maturity, staying at the most beautiful age. This is something that many women envy. This is much more reliable than some old parasol monster who claims to be 18 forever. And as long as the soul body is not scattered, it can gradually become stronger as it is replenished again and again. Hundreds of years later, the strongest existence on Turtle Island may be this ghost girl who can only act as a mascot now. Drinking tea and reading is one of Robin's favorite things, but she soon finds it boring. Because Perona is still weak, not only can she not touch the entity, but even the noon sun will make her feel stinging. She went to have tea with Perona. More often, she was actually taking care of the little girl, reading books and chatting with her. Moreover, Perona has not been on the island for the past 2 days, and Robin can't find anyone who wants to talk. So one afternoon, Robin found Loya. You said you wanted to go out and find historical texts. Sitting on the main seat of the castle hall, Loya raised his head from behind the newspaper and looked at Robin in surprise. Haven't you always been longing for this kind of innocence, without worrying about the enemy's manhunt? Why do you still want to go out? Robin's experience in previous years was not good. Looking at the black belly she showed in the Straw Hat group in the future and the inexplicable horror associations, she knew that this woman had a lot of unknown darkness in her heart. Perhaps those wounds gradually healed with the happiness of the Straw Hats, but they always left her with indelible scars. However, due to the appearance of Loya, everything has ended prematurely now. With the protection of the ice dragon, for a long time, no one dared to provoke her. So why go out now? It's quiet, isn't it? Loya was very curious about this. Well, just take this as a woman's whim and want to go out to relax. Facing Loya, who was focusing on himself, the suffocating oppression that followed made him she couldn't stop trembling, but Robin still tried to keep herself smiling and said in a calm tone, I feel like I'm going to be a dead person on the island, so I want to play a role. After all, the meaning of your protecting me, didn't you see my ability to read historical texts? It makes sense. A philosopher told me that everyone has a meaning in his existence, even if he feels that he is worthless. Loya thought for a while and gave up on Robin's persuasion. Then he beckoned and let the few living people in the castle come over, tilting his head and instructing, go and call Jones over. This is because I don't trust me, so let him come with me to monitor me. Seeing Loya's actions, Robin's eyes dimmed. Sure enough, you are not the one, Saren said, willing to protect my companion. However, she did not express these emotions, and sat silently and drank coffee. The bitter taste without sugar could temporarily numb the feelings in her heart. Soon, Jones came in from outside, stinking and sweating after exercising. He pushed open the door, glanced at Robin, and walked to Loya. Captain, are you looking for me? Well, I have something to tell you. Loya slowly closed the newspaper and took a sip of yuhi tea. The sea will be relatively calm for a long time to come. I plan to take this opportunity to go out and play for a while, so the affairs of Turtle Island will be left to you. Huh. The hand holding the coffee cup stagnated in the air. Robin raised his head in surprise. His beautiful eyes were full of doubts, as if he did not understand why Roja made this decision. Go out, play. Jones was full of time, but he didn't know what to say. By the way, is it really time to go out and play? Drake and Perona have already left for Dressrosa, and they will arrive in 2 more days. Don't you care about taking revenge for Zephyr when K. Rockdale comes back? Seeing Jones' constipated expression, Loya knew what he wanted to ask. Just leave those things to K. Rockdale, I don't need to do anything at all. It turns out that he can already take on such a heavy responsibility. I really can't see it. Jones wanted to complain about Loya's arrangement, but it's right to think about it, as Loya made it with special abilities. The first Death Knight, K. Rockdale's strength is definitely not as much as they showed when they competed against each other. So Jones nodded, indicating that he understood what to do. Seeing this, Luoya straightened his clothes and stood up, stretched his waist greatly. Hey, it's a natural hard work, why am I so diligent? After speaking, ignoring the twitching corners of Joan's mouth, Luoya suddenly remembered something and continued. Oh, by the way, Robin will also go with me this time, so everything on Turtle Island is up to you. Come on. Robin, too. Jones turned his head in surprise and glanced at Nicole Robin, who was drinking coffee quietly, as if he suddenly understood something. Just say whatever you want to ask, or you won't be able to speak later. Standing on the highest point of Turtle Island, Luoya said to Robin, who was carrying a suitcase beside him. No, I don't have anything to say. Robin stroked his temples and pursed his lips quietly. She looked at her surroundings and asked strangely, by the way, Captain, what are we doing here? Looking at the circle of cliffs around him, Robin was very curious about how Roja was going to set off. And, what does it mean to be speechless after a while? Isn't the mouth growing on her own? Seemingly seeing Robin's doubts, Luoya suddenly turned black and took her over. Aren't you looking for historical texts? I happen to know that several of them exist, so let's drop by and have a look. Put on your mask, it should be cold later. Robin suddenly understood something, and suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart. However, without waiting for her to say anything, Luoya suddenly stretched out two wide wings behind her back, and then waved hard. The two suddenly left the ground and disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. In the distance, there seems to be a screaming female voice, indicating that the journey will not be very pleasant. Chapter 417 Buy something. How could Roja tell Robin that when he was changing the dragon's body, he forgot a very important thing? In his understanding, all dragon slayer wizards have no means of transportation. So this characteristic was reflected on his body, the ice dragon slayer magician, as he traveled. That is seasickness. In the world of One Piece, where the sea is so vast. Seasick. But it's such a crucial matter. When he came back, he even forgot. You dare to believe it? Even the fact that he couldn't change back into a human form after being transformed into a dragon was modified by him, but he forgot to modify the transport of the dragon slayer magician's halo. He also wanted to drink tea and hum a little tune, bask in the sun slowly, take a stroll in the sea, fish and blow the wind or something. As an office worker who lived in the inland, he had only seen the sea a few times. How could there be such a luxury? This is a big dream of Luoya. However, it can't be. Because he made a stupid mistake, he has absolutely no way to deal with this situation now. As a result, Luoya abandoned the idea of looking for another Pippi shrimp, and decided to only use his flying ability to travel in the future. Tired, but at least not dizzy. Is that why you made me wear goggles and a mask? The wind whistled in his ears, and Robin, who was flying fast, didn't care about the difference between men and women, and hugged Luoya's waist tightly. Although he knew that Luoya had a good hearing, Robin still asked his own questions in a very loud voice. Oh yes, you should also wear a padded jacket. Luoya turned to look at her, and suddenly patted her forehead. Then, he stopped moving abruptly, and the two suddenly fell weightlessly. Ah! Falling from a height of thousands of meters is more exciting than pirate ships and roller coasters. Humans cannot fly, so they are afraid of high altitudes. Robin is no exception. The two emotions of excitement and fear are fermenting in her heart at the same time, making her feel unprecedented anger. But even if she wanted to curse, at this helpless moment, she could only hug Luoya tightly, hoping that he was teasing her. After all, at an altitude of several thousand meters, it is not the problem of the corpse and the crippled Mukuro, but whether she will be evenly distributed within a radius of 100 meters or within a radius of 200 meters, whether it is sputtering or gathering. Such a terrifying question. But fortunately, Luoya just felt that it was a little less laborious to land in this way, and she was not going to fall to her death. So when approaching the town below, Roja slammed his wings, and the powerful recoil made the two immediately stop in the air, and then slowly landed. Stepping on the stone road in the town, Robin knelt down on the ground with soft legs, breathing the fresh air with big mouthfuls. Then, with a bang, Robin got into the store next to her at a speed she hadn't shown when she escaped before. It was only 10 minutes after departure, and Robin already regretted his decision. If she had a choice, she would definitely reject Loya righteously, even if that coercion suffocated her. It would be many times better than now. Seeing this, Luoya's mouth showed a cheap smile from the plan, and shouted loudly. Give you 10 minutes to pick out a warm suit for yourself, and we'll go on in 10 minutes. There was no response from the store, as if Robin had run away. But Loya knew that she was just sitting on a chair drinking hot water to calm her fears. God's will is like this, who told her to get into a clothing store? In 10 minutes, even a lady can choose a suitable dress. At this moment, the rest of the people on the street finally came to their senses from the fact that justice came down from the sky. Bah! The fact that men and women came down from the sky suddenly ran away in panic. In the distance, a group of guys dressed as pirates rushed over with weapons and yelled loudly, "Everything is scattered, Captain Jin Guduo is here." Although Loya has read One Piece, it doesn't mean that he remembers every pirate he has ever played. But even if he didn't know the dark man who was leading, he knew what the mark on the other side represented. Is this Whitebeard's territory? There is a very funny thing in the New World, that is, here, the Navy is not the protector of the common people. Especially in Whitebeard's territory, the crew members under Whitebeard are the ones who are deeply loved by the people. Isn't it funny that a pirate protects civilians and even has more prestige than the Navy? Jin Guduo is the captain of the 11th Division under Whitebeard. He is extremely capable of melee combat. A pair of iron gauntlets can even block the bombardment of cannons. He is a meat shield type powerhouse similar to Aldo, but more flexible than the latter. This time, he was still at the forefront, and when his subordinates reported that someone broke into the town from the sky, he felt that the opponent should be difficult to deal with. So he did not let his men go to investigate the situation, but rushed over in person. But when he saw the appearance of the person in front of him, he suddenly stopped and put his hands on his chest, showing a vigilant look. It turned out to be you. Ice Dragon, Loya. What? He's the Ice Dragon Loya who offered a reward of 10 billion. The surrounding pirates took a deep breath and looked at Loya in shock, looking at the existence that broke the record and set the highest bounty. If it hadn't been for someone familiar to see Loya's changed appearance, it would actually be difficult to tell the difference. But because of the terrifying amount of the bounty, his existence will definitely be known to the world, so the world government directly posted the bounty order on Loya's later appearance, so as to avoid making jokes in the future. As the captain of Whitebeard, even though they are still full of confidence in their father and believe that Whitebeard is the strongest man, no one should be more careful about this legendary Loya. So just watching from a distance, Jin Guduo recognized Loya and became hesitant. Why is Loya here? Jin Guduo thought suspiciously. If the other party came to invade Daddy's land, why would he appear here? To be fair, the town he was stationed in was already the center of the sea area under Whitebeard's banner. Whoever fights and grabs territory will start from the central position where the opponent is tightly defended. Haven't seen pig run and eaten pork before. But if he wasn't here to find trouble, what was he here for? Loya, Your Excellency, what are you doing here? Facing the terrifying Loya, Jin Guduo, the strong man, also learned to be humble, and his words became much more polite. After saying this, his subordinates were even more terrified. Is the captain who speaks so politely and understands etiquette really the captain who fights every time he disagrees? Me. Hearing the movement, Loya turned his head and smiled at him. Don't be nervous, I'm just here to buy something. Buy something? Jin Guduo looked confused. Does a big man like you have anything to buy? Even if the captain of the small 11th Division wanted something, he ordered his subordinates to help him do it. A big man like you has to go out in person. I'm afraid I didn't meet a fake ice dragon. At the moment when the onlookers were stunned, Robin pushed open the glass door of the store in a timely manner, and walked out holding his changed clothes. She first glanced at the sluggish pirates around, and then said to Loya, "I've bought it, let's go." "It's very fast." Seeing Robin put on a dark blue down jacket, Loya smiled slightly. "This color is very suitable for you." "Thank you for the compliment." Robin smiled and thanked Loya, then walked over to him with his clothes in his arms. "Really came to buy something." At this moment, Jin Guduo is depressed and wants to vomit blood. Co-authoring himself and others rushed over with great fanfare, and the result was an oolong. However, no matter how shocked they were, seeing Robin put on his shoulders, Loya smiled, fluttered his wings into the sky, and soon disappeared. When Loya and the others disappeared, a pirate silently walked to Jin Gudo and asked in a low voice, "Captain, what should we do? What else can be done?" Jin Guduo came back to his senses and waved his hand. "Notify Dad that the ice dragon Loya has appeared. Moreover, he is also with Nicole Robin, the son of the devil." For a time, the whole sea was silent again. Because of the reappearance of Loya, the sea that had just started to be full of waves fell silent again. And this time, there is a little more unusual meaning. Chapter 418 Fight for the Master. For the edition of Shui Yu Cold Days Boss. Who is Nicole Robin? The orphan of the O'Hara incident, the only person in the world who understands the existence of ancient writing, and the key to uncovering the fog of the century. When she was just 8 years old, she was offered a reward of 79 million Bailey by the world government, which was enough to show how much the world government was afraid of her existence. In a sense, this achievement is no less than the tens of billions of bounties that Loya has now received. And it is such an existence that the ice dragon Loya is now with her. So does it mean that Loya is also interested in historical texts? This is not good news for any organization or force. In particular, those forces that preserve historical texts quickly shrink their forces after receiving the news to prevent Loya from coming to snatch it. Even if they are very clear in their hearts, doing so is just for peace of mind. Regarding this guess, it has to be said that they guessed correctly. However, Loya has the inherent advantage of knowing the plot of Akatsuki's original work, so he is not prepared to snatch other people's historical texts, which is too troublesome and inappropriate. Therefore, the goal of his trip is the historical texts that appeared in the original books, the historical texts that no one knows about Akatsuki's existence, such as the piece on the empty island. The original book has clearly stated that it records the whereabouts of the ancient weapon sea King Poseidon, but Robin does not know about it. "Anyway, I'm looking for it, why don't you go and have a look? And on the empty island, there is still so much gold to bring back. Don't think that the dead don't need money. The armor is okay, and if the hand is broken, you can get it back from K. Rockville or Loya, but in terms of weapons, this requires a real gold and white silver. In particular, Turtle Island is still undergoing major development, and Ratchet's ingenuity requires a lot of Bailey to fully function, and these are things that require a lot of money to do. I don't know if Chai Mi is expensive, and after taking control of a power, Loya understands how difficult it is to be the boss, and he takes great pains to do so. Flying from the New World to Gaia Island, the paradise in the first half of the Great Route, even at the speed of Loya, this is not something that can be done in a short time, so Robin's trip to buy a cotton jacket is actually very necessary. When Loya and Robin embarked on a thrilling journey only for Robin, K. Rockville finally arrived at the destination, the huge iceberg grave outside the Sea of Alabasta. Everyone knows that a large number of Navy and pirates are buried here, including those ships full of treasures. The benefits of this are enough to attract countless villains to take risks and come here to hunt for treasures. However, under the protection of the joint forces of the G6 branch of the Navy and the King's Guard of Alabasta, no one has been able to take the treasure from here. Those who have the ability to snatch treasures also understand the horror of Loya, and dare not touch this great miracle he created. However, today is a little different. The rules here are about to be broken, and Loya's power will once again be displayed in front of the world. Get out of the way, I'm not interested in killing people. Holding a cigar, K-Rockville raised his chin slightly and calmly watched the nervous coalition troops in front of him. They couldn't help but be nervous. Leaving aside K-Rockville, the former Shichibukai, the group of undead soldiers and ghost ships holding weapons was enough to make them tremble. K-Rockville, aren't you dead? Aware of the movement here, Yaka of the Jackal quickly ran over. He recognized at a glance who the pale black-haired man in front of him was, and suddenly widened his eyes in disbelief. Although he had never seen the body of a sand crocodile, he had witnessed the collapse of the Ba Rock Works. As Chiwahai, if he hadn't died, how could he tolerate the organization he had painstakingly built up to be wiped out bit by bit like a blunt knife? Especially a guy with a deep mind like Sand Crocodile. Let his plan fail, he is a ruthless character that even his subordinates will not let go. Regarding Gaka's question, K-Rockville had anticipated it before going to sea, so now facing the question, he swiped Sasori's poisonous hook directly to his heart, revealing the pitch-black meatball inside that had stopped beating. Ah, I am indeed dead, but I am back again as a dead man. Gollum. The sound of swallowing saliva sounded from the coalition army camp, and many soldiers were trembling in their calves, and they could not wait to escape from this ghost place in the next second. However, what if you come back? Gaka summoned his courage and shouted loudly, we are not what we used to be. This time, I must defeat you with my own hands. When K-Rockville was alive, everything he did to Alabasta was unforgivable. Failure to take revenge with his own hands has always been a scar on the hearts of the two patron saints of Gaka and Bell. Now that he sees K-Rockville again, Gaka is not only not afraid, but even still a little excited. Hey, the trouble is dead. Seeing the look in Gaka's eyes, Rockdale knew what he was going to do, loyalty and self-awareness. He slowly raised his hand, and a mass of green energy mixed with purple and black appeared in his palm. Even if they were far apart, the allied army team could smell the pungent putrid stench and feel an uneasy feeling. Verbal threat. The opponent's Sha Lan is also accumulating power like this, so he can't let him release his moves. Gaka made a decision in an instant, touched the hilt of the sword with his right hand, and rushed towards K-Rockville with a stride. Go to hell, bastard. You used to be an ant in my eyes, and now. It's no exception. Ignoring the samurai sword that Gaka cleaved over, K-Rockville raised his hand lightly, and the green light filled with various colors exploded violently, spreading out in all directions. Taste my new powers, seed of the plague. Hum. In the air, an invisible force let out a low cry, and all living people felt the creepy danger. But they didn't have time to dodge, and the fluctuations had already spread to the audience. Puff puff. Soldiers after another fell on the ice, rolling around in pain, or curling up into a ball. Ah, I can't breath. Well, so uncomfortable. Help, help, help me. A trace of miserable green mist emerged from their facial features, and between them, a skeleton-like figure appeared on their chests. Gaka's long knife still slashed on K-Rockville's shoulder, but he no longer had the energy to swing the old man who had followed him for decades. After a slight bump, he weakly loosened the hilt and let it slip. On the ground. Nausea, dizziness, fever for a while, and a lack of energy, these are symptoms that only appear when you are seriously ill, but in that instant, all the living people present became this look. With the powerful flash of the animal fruit, Gaka did not fall into the same pain as the others and couldn't extricate himself. He tried hard to maintain his sanity, knelt on the ground and raised his head with difficulty, staring at K-Rockville angrily. What have you done to us? It's just a little plague. Don't worry, if the treatment is done in time, it will usually not die. Crocodile smiled, squatted down and spit out an unfiltered smoke ring, which slammed into Canada. Card face. I'm just here to find someone. If you don't want your people to die in vain, I advise you not to disturb me. Looking for someone. Gaka gasped hard, and the cold sweat on his forehead had blurred his vision. This is the tomb of the Navy. If you dare to do something here, aren't you afraid that Loya will trouble you? Up to now, Gaka can only move out the ice dragon Loya, who was declared to have deserted the navy, hoping that his name will make K-Rockdal feel jealous. But he guessed wrong. K-Rockdal slowly wandered around the ice layer, and suddenly looked at the ice surface under his feet with a smile. Loya. Are you talking about my master? Master. Gaka looked at K-Rockdal in horror, and suddenly felt that the sky was dark, and he fell heavily to the ground. He has been supporting it for a long time, and the others lost consciousness and coma long before he asked questions. Yes, that's right, the master. Rockdale murmured these two words without even looking at the unconscious Gaka. Then, he pulled out the skeleton sword with more decorative effect than its actual meaning from his back, and slammed it heavily into the ice layer. Stand up, slaves. Fight for the master. Chapter 419 Another use of fauna fruit. In order to solve the problem of insufficient combat power in the undead army, Loya has considered many ways, but no matter how he thought about it, he could not find a place that could expand the number of the undead army on a large scale. And if the resurrected undead were not strong enough before their death, no matter how much power he used to transform them, they would not be able to play their due value. Until one day, Rockdale told him that there were still many pirates in the icebergs that had been buried together with the Navy soldiers. The country of Alabasta is of great significance to K-Rockdar, so he paid a little more attention to the information after the Alabasta War. This sentence reminded Loya that although the number of pirates captured by the Navy last year was huge, there were also a lot of pirates who died on that battlefield. And in terms of strength, it far exceeds the average level on the Great Route. For example, Bailey, the great pirate who was torn off his leg by him and was about to be brought back alive to be executed, brought his pirate career to an end in the subsequent battle. Well, Bailey, a generation of great pirates, died in the melee that broke out between the pirates, and was even shot in the head with a musket by an unimportant low-level handyman. But for the undead army, it is not a big problem to have a head or not. They are not zombies in zombie movies, and they have no fatal weakness except for their souls. So Loya made up his mind, and there was K-Rockdal's trip to see this time. Of course, K-Rockdal does not have the power to directly resurrect the dead, and he is not here to be a porter. The reason why he didn't like carrying that obstructive skeleton sword on his back was because Loya engraved the power of the resurrected undead on this sword. And it's not a one-time item. If the magic power in it is exhausted, it can be reused after taking it back to let Loya recharge it, which is environmentally friendly and hygienic without polluting the environment. And at critical moments, K-Rockdal can also rely on the undead magic inside to urgently recover from injuries and carry out outbreaks. It is definitely a must-have artifact for home travel, murder and arson. It's that shape. It would be great if it could be made into the shape of Sasori's poisonous hook. The coalition army soldiers who had fainted could not see the next scene, but the undead soldiers brought by K-Rockdal could see it clearly. After K-Rockdal's great sword was inserted, nothing happened in the first few seconds, but then, a violent vibration came out, and the sea around the iceberg kept rolling in this terrifying vibration. A circle of waves quickly formed and spread to the distance. Then, click. A stiff, frozen pale and purple palm broke the ice surface and buckled heavily on the ice layer. With this leverage point, the owner of the palm quickly climbed out from under the ice. With disheveled hair and a bloodless face, this undead who climbed back from hell looked up at the sun in the sky and roared in a hoarse voice. The roar of the undead is not loud, but this scene is enough to make the soldiers who are already dead feel terrified. If they still have that organ. Welcome to join us, Blood Count Ulysses. K-Rockdal smiled and took back the great sword, holding it against his back. Master has been waiting for you for a long time. It is a novel experience to be able to speak without breathing. Hearing the words of Rockdale, the revived Ulysses tried several times before letting his dry throat make a sound that others could understand. Lord, people. Yes, Master. Rockdale waved his coat, opened his hands as if embracing something, and his eyes were full of enthusiasm. Give you, the masters of the second life. We. Ulysses turned his head and looked at the empty ice. Then, click click. One arm, complete or remnant, protruded out of the ice layer, and the long-dead Mukuro crawled out of the iceberg grave one after another. Looking at the number, it was compared to the undead army on Turtle Island. Not much more. We. Ulysses suddenly understood why at the last moment, Luoya clearly had the ability to smash him with a slap, but he had to drain his vitality. It's definitely not a good experience. Even if you die, keep fighting. The New World, the waters near Dressrosa. I said Drake, although I have not been to Dressrosa, but looking at the defensive layout here, it is obviously not the layout that a country should have under normal circumstances. Perona floated beside Drake with her lovely parasol that only gave her some psychological comfort. She can bypass the heavily guarded soldiers through the characteristics of the ghost itself, but not Drake. His signature chin is so unsightly that unless it's cut off, people will recognize who he is at a glance. Because of Loya's betrayal of the Navy, he, the Major Admiral traitor of the Navy, was also turned over from the old yellow calendar, and various comments were made. But cutting off the chin is a very unrealistic way, and Drake has no intention of really sacrificing Hugh because of the mission. And besides Drake, they were also accompanied by many soldiers this time, so everyone can't cut off their features and go in. Well, it's stumped me. Drake touched the scar on his chin, frowning and thinking. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. Otherwise, you can go in and find out the information. Anyway, you are a ghost, and no one can hurt you. Ha ha ha. No. Perona laughed out loud at first, and then decisively refused Drake's request. Please, I'm a girl. Can you point your face and let a little girl take the risk to collect information, while you are a big man hiding behind and enjoying the success? And most importantly, I have no relevant experience in collecting intelligence. Since you used to be a rear admiral, you should be better than me as a grandmaster. It's well said. Hearing Perona's teasing, Drake couldn't help but make a Yuhi face and smiled shyly. But since Perona cannot be allowed to collect intelligence alone, how can they get in? Dressrosa is clearly under martial law now, and I don't know if it's because of Loya's departure from the Navy. These guys of unknown origin entered the city without authorization, and I am afraid that they would have to be killed by the cadres of the Don Quixote family together at the gate of the city. Perona saw it. At the only entrances to Dressrosa, there were cadres from the Don Quixote family leading soldiers from various divisions to garrison. It was very irrational to force abruptly. A pica is indeed a serious loss for the Flamingo, but it is not enough to hurt the entire Don Quixote family. For a time, both of them were stumped by this question. It would be great if it was Loya. Drake sighed so deeply. Although the current K-Rockville is strong, he does not have the absolute power that crushes everything like Loya. Moreover, this mission Loya also requires them to catch alive, which adds a lot of difficulty to an already difficult mission. Otherwise, they don't have to take such pains to collect information, just wait for Loya to rush in to solve everything and then clean up the battlefield. But if means no, if happens, the problem is still before them. After frowning again for a long time, Perona's eyes suddenly lit up, remembering what she saw when she went to check the situation before. Hey, Drake, although they are well guarded, they have not refused the entry of caravans and tourists. You say, can we disguise as caravans and sneak in? Dressrosa is a tropical island with a holiday style. If they even ban tourists and caravans from entering, then even if we don't care about anything, they are not far from the country. Drake replied, you have a good idea, but how do we avoid being recognized? Those cadres are all strongmen in the New World who can use observation hockey. It is impossible to hide such a thing without a person who is stronger than the other party. I'm sorry, Drake is just a guy who Grandmaster is armed with and ignorant of knowledge. I suddenly had a brilliant idea. Perona smiled and circled around Drake. Aren't you an animal fruit person? You said, how about we disguised as a circus and entered? Hold the grass. Drake's eyelids twitched, and his heart suddenly shivered. It seems that the door to a new world is about to be opened. Chapter 420 Death of Ace. New World, within the waters of the Uhifa Pirates. There is a small island rich in products. The island is densely covered with jungles and flocks of birds and beasts. It is a rare and fertile island without human intervention. At the same time, because the beasts on the island are too dangerous, and not many people are willing to live here, the population has been unable to develop. This also laid the foundation for the island to retain such a beautiful environment, of course, more because of Yuhi's orders. Protect this place, the future banquets will be held here. Yuhi, who was on the island for the first time, said so. Even if he is a bold, generous and informal character, who is often laid back in both his clothes and his attitude, he is fascinated by the scenery of the island at first sight. Moreover, as one of the 4 emperors of the New World, the supernovas who have to do a lot of things every year are not even his turn to do it himself. With enough free time, Uhifa often held banquets, drank and sang on this island, and lived a very pleasant life. This banquet has already started for 3 days, but according to expectations, it will take at least a week before the result. But something happened today, so the banquet could no longer go on. Because of his frequent visits, Uhifa built some necessary facilities on the island. For example, a wine cellar for storing fine wine and a kitchen for storing various seasonings and pots. Of course, there are also essential housing and an operating room for emergency treatment. Anyway, you have to prepare, just digging the wine cellar always feels weird. So at Beckman's insistence, there is so much infrastructure here. However, the people who came here this time exceeded their original expectations, so they still had to set up many tents, and then all the wounded were arranged. After opening the tent and walking out, Shanks took off the mask on his face and asked with a serious face, "How is Ace?" "The condition has calmed down and should be fine, but his co-captain." Beckman shrugged and didn't finish his sentence, but his message was very clear. Although Ace decisively ordered to escape, no more plague bombs fell on the deck. But his co-captain was different. He was almost hit by a cannonball in the front. The rotten flesh full of plague and germs smeared his face and entered his body almost at 0 distance with his breathing. In addition, there is nothing around Cannibal Island, let alone small islands, few reefs can be seen. Without medicine, it is difficult for a clever woman to cook without rice. Even the most brilliant doctor can't do anything about the plague, and his condition has been dragged on. The location of the Cannibal Island is just like this, otherwise it would not have been a no man's land before this, and it would not be occupied by any forces. Therefore, his condition was the most serious, and it was beyond most people's imagination to be able to persist until he came to Uhifa's territory to seek help. However, it seems that this is his limit. He was in a coma for 3 days in a row, and his vital signs were getting weaker and weaker, which meant that he didn't have much time. "Boy Ace, you like his companion very much." Shanks sighed and ordered his men to carry the dead patient away and put them in the quarantine area. With a wave of his hand, he said to Beckman, "Come on, let's go see him." Uhifa hadn't left his territory for a long time since Loya was announced to be defecting from the Navy. But that doesn't mean he doesn't know anything. The little guy who used to trade with him on Ian Island is as dangerous and mysterious as he thought. Not only is his strength already listed at the pinnacle of this world, but even the things he planned are equally earth-shattering. Later, Loya went to Cannibal Island. This information can hide most people, but it can't hide him. Because this is the New World, the domain of the 4 emperors. Therefore, Yuhi clearly knew where the power that caused the Spade Pirates to suffer heavy losses came from, and also clearly knew the meaning behind it. Ace is Luffy's older brother, and he is also a powerful pirate himself. Naturally, he will not be arranged in a tent like the ordinary crew. In the direction close to the sea, there is a white house standing alone, where Ace is now. Walking to the door of the room with Beckman, Shanks was just about to open the door when suddenly the door was violently smashed and fell heavily. "Huh." Looking at the figure who was about to jump over the gate, Shanks frowned and slapped the gate with a slap. Boom. Boom. Being slapped by Yuhi's palm, the collapsed door suddenly changed direction and swooped down. Ace, who was caught off guard, didn't have time to dodge. His forehead hit it directly, and then was smashed back into the room by the door. It hurts. Covering his head, Ace's painful eyes were about to fall, and he looked at Shanks dissatisfied. Hey, Yuhifa, what are you doing? Be polite to your savior, bastard. Beckman squinted his eyes and snorted coldly, then walked over and lifted Ace up, and in front of you is the four Emperor Shanks. If you don't know the etiquette, I don't mind teaching you instead of carp. Ace also suddenly remembered what happened before he fell into a coma, broke free from Beckman's big hand, stood there and bowed at Shanks's respectful 90 degrees. I'm sorry Mr. Shanks, please forgive my recklessness. After Sabo's death, he was determined to set an example for Luffy, but Ace had learned various etiquette from Miss Makino. If it wasn't for being too anxious just now, he would definitely not have done such a rude thing. The two sides had contact, so Shanks also knew Ace's character. So he waved his hand to forgive Ace, and looked around the room curiously. What a mess, what are you doing? Hearing Shanks' words, Ace touched the back of his head with embarrassment, and then quietly kicked a fallen book into the bottom of the table with his foot. Of course, this little change wasn't enough to cover up the warlike chaos in the room, but instead made him seem stupid. What? I want to go to my crew, they won't let me go, so I. Looking in the direction Ace pointed, Shanks saw his own ship doctor with a footprint on his face. His face turned black, and the corners of his mouth twitched. So you want to break out? Beckman and Shanks looked at each other, and suddenly thought of a certain little bean ding who was clamoring to become the Pirate King. Sure enough, these two are brothers, and Hulai's style is really the same. By the way, Mr. Shanks, how is my crew? Are they all right? Ace suddenly asked anxiously. He only saw this small island before he passed out. He stuck the rudder with his arm to ensure the sailing ship's forward direction, and then passed out. He had no impression of what happened later. No. He was also the one who lasted the longest in the Spade Pirates. Without Ace, the entire Spade Pirates would have died and disappeared into the sea. Sure enough, it's time to come. Hearing the question, Shanks fell silent, staring at Ace quietly. This abnormal behavior made Ace suddenly have an ominous premonition, and his throat was dry for a while. What happened? They. Most. Still alive. Shanks said slowly, some people are too sick to be rescued. Boom. Suddenly, Ace only felt a bolt of lightning cut through his mind, and his vision became blurred. Then his body softened and slowly fell backwards. But Shanks didn't let him fall on the hard floor, and caught him with a dodge. Looking at Ace's eyes that lost focus due to the blow, Shanks whispered, I'm sorry Ace, I don't have enough medicines here, No, it's none of your business. Ace stared at his confused eyes, whispered to stop Shanks from continuing, and smiled bleakly, it's all my fault. I asked them to go that route, if it wasn't for me, they won't die either. Shanks didn't know how to answer this sentence. The same goes for Beckman, who can only sigh softly and sigh with emotion. This is the true face of the new world.